What's going on, guys? Chip here. Welcome back to another Pokemon TCG video, and today I have a very special guest on to do our Burning Shadows set review. I'm joined today by Mike Fouchet. How's it going, Mike?
Yeah, it's going great, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a chance real quick for those who don't know who you are. Just give you a second to introduce yourself, background in the game, stuff like that. So yeah, go ahead. Feel free.
Sure. Yeah, so I've been playing for quite a while. Since Nintendo took over in 2004 is when I first started playing competitive, and kind of messed around a little bit before that. I got my Worlds invite for a number of years back then, like 04 through 08. Then I went to college, kind of tapered off my playing a little bit, casual competitive. Then once I graduated college, got a job, jumped back in, and so this will be my third year back in the game competitively, and I've got my Worlds invite every year so far, so
Nice.
very excited to play in Worlds again this year, and a big part of that is figuring out what the heck all these Burning Shadow cards are going to do and how they fit into the metagame.
Yeah. So yeah, when we're talking about the set, guys, we're going to be talking about it mostly with Worlds in mind, because that's how we've both been thinking about the cards, but we'll also touch on things that, like, oh yeah, this card could maybe be better post-rotation, or maybe this can, if something comes out in the future that would make this card better, something like that. But we're going to go through the set straight through. We are looking at pokebeach.com right now. I will have a link to this in the description so you guys can check it out yourselves as well. But without further ado, we're going to try to power through this and get through pretty quickly. For the cards that, there are going to be some cards that it's kind of obvious that they're not really cards that are ever going to see too much competitive play. We'll read through every card, talk about attacks, and we might do like a thumbs up, thumbs down rating system. So if it's just a thumbs down, we'll skip over it and keep going to the next one. So you ready to do this?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All right, man. Starting off, we've got an evolution here of Caterpie, Metapod, and Butterfree. Caterpie, surprise attack for a grass, 20 damage. The coin does nothing. Nothing really to mention on the Metapod either, but Butterfree here, stage 2 grass type. Bye-bye healing for a grass. Heal all damage from all of your Pokemon. Shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your deck. And then grass, colorless, colorless. Stun Spore does 60 damage. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. Anything there about Butterfree?
Yeah, I actually think this is a really interesting card. When we were after internationals, a bunch of us went out for dinner and we were kind of looking through the scans. And Butterfree, we talked about for a little while. Bye-bye healing is a very unique attack, being able to heal all your Pokemon. And especially as a grass Pokemon, shuffling itself back into its deck is not that big of a deal right now because we have Forest of Giant Plants, so you can pretty easily just get it right back on the board. This could lead to some kind of weird stall deck where it's like Butterfree Wailord or something like that,
Okay,
where
yeah.
you know, Wailord takes a big hit, you plop down a Butterfree the next turn with Forest of Giant Plants, heal it off, goes back into your deck. Now it's kind of a twofold, right? Because A, you're healing the damage off, but B, you're also putting cards back into your deck. So it is impossible for you to deck out, while it is certainly possible for your opponent to deck out. Beyond that, I don't really see much use to it, and I don't necessarily think that that's a competitively viable deck, but I think it's something at least worth thinking about.
Yeah, no, that's definitely kind of a, well, like when we're thinking about decks and stuff for tournaments, we're always going to come through these like crazy wacky ideas that probably aren't ever going to be actually viable, but are definitely just like kind of fun ideas, you know, and might be worth just like testing out for the fun of it. And you never know, sometimes those wacky decks end up actually being really good. So
Right, exactly.
yeah, cool. All right, so we'll move on here to a Vileplume line. We've got Oddish here. Grass, Poison Powder, your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. This is probably a better replacement for the current Oddish we have in Standard that just does 10 for a grass. So in your Decidueye Vileplume decks, you'd probably play this Oddish instead. We've got Gloom here. Sticky Scent for a grass. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Razor Leaf, 30 damage for grass and colorless. And then Vileplume here, a stage 2 with Disgusting Pollen. If this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, your opponent's basic Pokemon can't attack. And then attack, grass, grass, colorless. Downer Shock, 60 damage. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. If tails, they are now confused. So I think that, you know, we obviously have the Vileplume right now with Irritating Pollen that shuts off items. I could see maybe some Decidueye Vileplume decks or existing Vileplume decks playing one copy of this Vileplume against things like Volcanion, which play no non-basic attackers. You got anything to say about the Vileplume here?
Pretty much just that. I don't see it really being a deck in and of itself, but compared with the other Vileplume, it could give you a potential auto win. And I do think it's really important, and I just want to reiterate, getting this Oddish and this Gloom could be a big difference. Especially the Gloom, I think being able to confuse for just a grass energy is actually quite strong in a deck that has item lock in it.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, definitely you could see, like we said, the Oddish and Gloom will be good in existing Vileplume decks. And then this could definitely be really, really good as just like a one-of against those decks that don't play. Like even Darkrai and stuff like that, they don't play any non-basic attackers. So post-rotation, probably we'd have to just wait to see what else comes out in the future. Right now, without Forest of Giant Plants, Grass Pokemon just take a huge hit. So
yeah, they have to join the rest of the types.
They don't get to keep cheating and skipping evolutions and stuff. All right, next we've got a Tangela and a Tangrowth here. Tangela, bind down, 10 damage. Defending Pokemon can't retreat during your opponent's next turn. Kind of interesting. And then Stage 1 Tangrowth, Giga Drain for a Grass, 30 damage. This Pokemon recovers HP equal to the amount of damage done to your opponent's active Pokemon. And then for 4 colorless energies, we've got Crosswise Whip, flip 4 coins, 50 damage times the number of heads. Retreat cost of 4, weakness to fire, no resistance, 140 HP. What do you think of Tangrowth?
I think the best part of Tangrowth is the attack name, Crosswise Whip. That's a pretty sweet name. But other than that, very weak card. I actually think the Tangela is better than the Tangrowth.
Yeah.
But anytime that a basic Pokemon has an attack that makes your opponent, the defending Pokemon, can't retreat, I think it's worth keeping in the back of your head. But
yeah,
Tangrowth, no way.
I mean, we do have you could throw a Choice Band on this guy, and then you have the Lurantis promo, so you can do some decent damage for 1 energy on a non-EX. But the healing, it's only got 140 HP, so it's not like you're going to survive too many hits. So I'd probably give this one a thumbs down right there with you. So. All right, let's keep going here with a Ladian and Ladybug. Ladybug, agility 10 damage, flip a coin if heads prevent all effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. We've seen this before for sure. And then Swift here on Ladian, 30 damage. This attack's damage isn't affected by weakness resistance, yada yada. And Comet Punch 40 times, flip 4 coins. This attack does 40 damage times the number of heads. What are you thinking? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Unfortunately for my friend Sam Chen, whose favorite Pokemon is Ladian, another bust on Ladian, unfortunately.
Yeah, sad to say. I mean, one thing to mention, I suppose, is that the Ladybug here, if we ever do get a really good Ladian, or like a Ladian GX or something like that, you could definitely use this Ladybug since, we've seen this agility / nuzzle type of attack before, bubble, things like that, that can potentially buy you turns to set up and stuff like that. So yeah, something to keep in the back of the mind for the future potentially. But right now, Ledian is a big flop.
Yeah.
All right, we've got Heracross here, 110 HP basic. Ability Guts. If this Pokemon would be knocked out by your opponent's attack, flip a coin. If heads, this Pokemon is not knocked out, and its remaining HP becomes 10 instead. And then for 2 Grass Energies, Pitch. 50 damage, your opponent switches their active Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. So I think the ability here is actually pretty interesting. If you can flip a lot of heads, this guy can survive for a long time. And but I don't think its attack is like necessarily that great. What do you think about Heracross?
Yeah, I agree. The attack is just whatever. If you play Grass Energy, you might use it. But Guts is actually pretty good, and kind of in the same vein of the Butterfree Wailord deck that I was talking about before. You could even play something like this, where you Butterfree, you heal up, you send out Heracross, and if they can even one-shot you, which isn't even a given necessarily at 110 HP, but if they can one-shot you, you have a 50% chance of just not dying anyway, and that's one less prize card that your opponent is going to take. And it's kind of comparable to, I think there's a Celebi promo out right now that has the same ability. But I think then it like shuffles into its deck rather. This is actually a little bit better than that, I think, because it has 40 more HP and it doesn't just go into your deck. It stays on the field, and so you don't have to like fish it out again.
Yeah, I mean, and I could even see this potentially being like a one-of attacker in like some sort of Decidui deck where you can increase the damage and. Yeah, I mean, if you got to choose which Pokemon they brought to the active, I could see it being a lot better. Since your opponent chooses, that can potentially help them in some instances. And since the way that it's worded right here, we'll have to see the exact translation. It says your opponent switches their active, so it's not like you may have your opponent switch their active. So it's something you have to do.
Yeah. The last thing I might say with is that if we ever get another good switching attacker like Donphan was, then this could be a decent partner with that as well.
Pangoro, dude. Pangoro from Breakpoint.
No idea what that does.
It's basically Donphan, but it only does 10 damage.
Oh.
So it's not very good. And it doesn't have Focus Sash or Strong Energy. But it does have Choice Band and Reverse Valley. But anyway.
There you go.
So we'll keep moving here. We've got Pansage and Simisage here. Pansage just Vine Whip, 10 damage for a grass. And Simisage, Scratch, 30 damage. And Leaf Supply, 50 damage. You may attach a Grass Energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon. So anytime we see Energy Acceleration, it's worth like looking at. But being a Stage 1, requiring a Grass and a Colorless, seems like this guy might be not that great.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of wish they would at some point make a half decent Simisage, Pansage, these Pokemon.
They've always been terrible.
Yeah, they've always been bad. Oh well.
Maybe someday they'll get their chance.
Yeah.
All right, we've got Dewpider and Araquanid here. Dewpider, ambush, 10 damage, flip a coin. If heads, it does 10 more damage for a grass. And then Araquanid, colorless, bubble net, 30 damage. Energy can't be attached to the defending Pokemon from your opponent's hand during their next turn. And Sharp Fang, grass, colorless, does 80 damage. What do you think of Araquanid?
If Araquanid's first attack can't attach energy, that would be quite good, but just the defending, nothing special. What's actually super exciting about these cards is actually not the Araquanid, but the Dewpider. With Forest of Giant Plants, you can go in one turn from Dewpider into the other Araquanid, the water one that can't be hit by fire guys. So if you have a deck that, like a grass deck, for example, that's very weak to Volcanion, you could actually stick in like a 1/1 or a 2/1 Dewpider and Araquanid, and now they won't even have the chance to Lysander up the Dewpider. You can just go right into the Araquanid.
Yeah. For sure. So yeah, the grass type, obviously being able to use it with Force Giant Plants is pretty solid. So let's keep moving here. We've got Wimpod and Gliscopod GX. We'll talk about Wimpod first. Pretty solid ability. Wimp out during your first turn. This Pokemon has no retreat cost. Definitely in a deck that I think is getting a decent amount of hype and probably will see play at Worlds and post-rotation. A good ability to have on a basic for an evolution deck. Gnaw, its attack, you probably won't use that often. Grass, colorless, 30 damage. And it also does have a retreat cost of 3, which is interesting as well since you can use Heavy Ball to search it out potentially. So synergy there since Wimpod and Gliscopod both have 3 retreat. And then Gliscopod GX, 210 HP grass type stage 1 Pokemon with 3 attacks. We've got First Impression, 30 damage for a grass energy, 30 plus 90 more damage if this Pokemon became your active Pokemon during this turn. Grass, colorless, Armor Press, 100 damage during your opponent's next turn. This Pokemon takes 20 less damage from your opponent's attacks. And then Grass, colorless, Crossing Cut GX, 150 damage. Switch this Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. Excuse me, you can't use more than 1 GX attack per game. So on and so forth. Fire weakness, no resistance, and a retreat of 3. So, like I said, I think this is a card that a lot of people are taking a long, hard look at. What have you found with Gliscopod in your testing so far?
So before I go into Gliscopod, I do want to comment on the Wimpod. The ability is actually like really good, especially because in a deck with Gliscopod, a lot of the lists are going to be playing Alolan Vulpix as well. So being able to free retreat into the Alolan Vulpix starting Wimpods, actually, it's kind of like the Zubat, right? In Toadbats and Expanded, where being able to free retreat into the guy that you want to on the first turn is incredibly powerful effect. So if Gliscopod wasn't a strong enough card on its own, the Wimpod really, I think, makes it even better. I haven't tested Gliscopod too much. I've played against it a handful of times. kind of the two variants that I'm seeing while I'm testing is Golisopod Decidui, as well as Golisopod and other stage ones. So that could be Golisopod with Zoroark, Golisopod with Evolutions, or with both of them. Both have been pretty solid. I think Golisopod Decidui has one of the better Gardevoir matchups from my testing so far compared to other decks, which is pretty big deal.
Yeah.
I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think Golisopod is solid. Like you said, I think Gardevoir GX is the big card out of this set that we're going to see a lot of people take to Worlds. And Golisopod does pretty well against that. It only needs 1 energy to attack, so Gardevoir can't really do much against that. And it has 210 HP. And you only attack for 1 energy, so you could run something like Max Potions to just continually heal, get a couple turns of healing in there. And yeah, I don't know. And if you're playing Force of Giant Plants as well, that's another thing that the Wimpod with the free retreat on the first turn lets you get off that turn 1 first impression for without having to play something like a Guzma to switch shit. So
right.
I don't even know if I haven't tested it myself personally, so I'm not even sure if Force of Giant Plants would be like the optimal stadium for Golisopod or not. I don't know.
Right. I think like if you're playing Decidueye with it, then obviously Forest is the way to go. But yeah, if you're just running the stage ones, I don't think you necessarily need it. I've played around with some different counts. Like some lists have 2, some have 0. The other thing I want to say is I've been mostly playing against it. I've been really impressed, surprisingly, with its GX attack as well, because you're just using first impression with the grass energy, and then since Crosscut GX just takes an extra double colorless, you can just kind of do that whenever you want. And so you can Crosscut GX for 180 damage potentially with the Choice Band, which knocks out so many things.
Good
but also,
yeah,
it's a great number to hit. And the fact that it switches you back to your bench, you can, I don't know, it's a much more powerful effect and attack than I gave it credit for initially.
Yeah, and that's where your Heracross could come into play, switching it back and letting Heracross take a hit maybe. But
yeah,
but yeah, I think Golisopod's solid. We'll probably see some players play it day 1 of Worlds. I don't think it'll be as popular as some of the other decks from this set, like Gardevoir.
Right.
But I don't know. I guess this probably would be the second most popular deck out of this set.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, if you're a Worlds player, you definitely need to expect to play against some form of Golisopod throughout your run because it will be played.
All right, moving right along, we've got the Charizard GX line. We've got Charmander here, Fire type 70 HP, Scratch 10 damage, Flame Tail 20, Charmeleon 30 damage and 70 damage, and Charizard GX 250 HP, Stage 2 Fire type with colorless Wing Attack, 70 damage, no effects, and then for 3 Fire, 2 colorless, Crimson Storm, 300 damage. Discard 3 fire energies from this Pokemon, and then Raging Out GX for a fire and 2 colorless. Discard the top 10 cards from your opponent's deck. You can only use 1 GX attack per game. So obviously Charizard, going to be a popular Pokemon from the set just because Charizard is such a popular Pokemon. They love giving this guy just a ton of HP and then attacks that do stupid amounts of damage, but the cost of having to discard 3 energy after powering up Crimson Storm just seems really like not great. Maybe an expanded with Blacksmith is not as bad, but it's, I don't know, it seems pretty slow to me. What are your thoughts on Charizard?
Yeah, I agree. I think this may sound silly, but if this was a basic Pokemon, like a Charizard EX, it would barely be playable, I think. I think it would be playable, but I think it would barely be playable. The fact that it's a stage 2 really pushes it out of the way. The GX attack is actually pretty cool. When I think there's another card in this set, Rhyperior, that focuses on discarding cards. So if somehow you could also fit a Charizard, like a thin Charizard GX line in that deck, you could potentially actually win by decking out. But yeah, the Crimson Storm I don't think would be the reason to play this card. I think it would be the GX attack.
Yeah, and there is, I think, the Charmander from Generations, I believe, has an attack that does 20 damage times the amount of damage counters on it. So that's something worth, for like, I think it's for like a fire and a colorless. So 2 energies, potentially doing a decent amount of damage with Shrine of Memory Stadium, or with the new Shining Celebi coming out for post-rotation, which does the same thing as Celebi EX did.
Actually, that's definitely something to consider. With 250 HP, it's going to take a couple hits. So
yeah, it's definitely a tank. So. All right, cool. So we'll keep on moving along here. We've got Ho-Oh GX, Fire type, 190 HP, basic Pokemon with Sacred Fire, Fire, double colorless. This attack does 50 damage, to one of your opponent's Pokemon. It would be really good if it was 90 damage to one Pokemon. Yeah. We've got Phoenix Burn, 3 fires and a colorless, 180 damage. Can't use Phoenix Burn during your next turn. And then the GX attack for a fire and colorless. Eternal Flame GX, put 3 in combination of fire, Pokemon EX or Pokemon GX from your discard pile onto your bench. Can't use more than 1 GX attack per game. Weak to lightning, resistant to fighting, and a 2 retreat. I think obviously this is a good card in the Volcanion decks currently, but what have your thoughts been with Ho-Oh GX so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think immediately for Worlds, I think that's the only implication of this, and I do think most Volcanions will opt to play a single copy of this strictly because of its different weakness than the rest of the deck. But I do think going forward, trying to come up with some type of crazy, potentially like a meme-ish type of deck with Eternal Light GX is something that we could see actually be viable. I don't think for Worlds, as the format I think is still a little bit too fast for a deck like that, but potentially post-Shaman, post-VS Seeker, this could actually be a deck.
Yeah. When the first time I read this card, I was like, this card is insane and expanded, because I thought you could use it to put like an Embor on your bench. But unfortunately, it's Pokemon EX or Pokemon GX. So I don't know. And expanded, like you could throw down like a Mega Charizard or something like that, where it does 300 damage and you just keep blacksmithing to it every turn, something like that. But yeah, like Mikey said, I think this is a card going forward that if they release a really cool Stage 2 Fire type that has a reasonable attack cost, that we could see Ho-Oh's GX attack being a kind of cool deck.
Yeah, and I mean even if they don't come out with another one, just Incineroar GX is actually pretty decent to kind of like swarm with and attack for cheap. I like I said, I don't think it's good for Worlds because it's too fast, but the format's too fast, but potentially going forward.
Yeah, that's definitely cool, yeah. Throwing down 3 250 HP Incineroar GXs kind of seems pretty nutty, not gonna lie. But all right, let's keep it moving here. We've got another monkey. We've got Panseer and Simisear. Nothing to really mention on the Panseer, but Simisear, Flare Recharge was talking about the second attack. Attach a fire energy from your discard pile to one of your benched Pokemon. So once again, we see energy acceleration here. Not really seeing it being that great of acceleration, though, especially when we have Volcanion, Baby Volcanion, that basically does the same thing, and it's a basic, has more HP, and is only 1 energy. So
nothing to add.
All right, we'll keep it moving then. We've got Heatmore here, 110 HP, basic fire type. Odor Sleuth, flip 2 coins. For each heads, put a card from your discard pile into your hand. That's for 2 colorless energy, and then for a fire colorless. Searing Flame, 60 damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. So I don't think his second attack is very good, but Odor Sleuth is something that could be kind of interesting. Putting 2 cards from your discard pile into your hand, even 1 card from your discard pile into your hand at certain points can be good if you only flip 1 heads. And we do also have Victini from the new set that lets you reflip potentially. So Heatmore, maybe you could see some sort of cool lock deck or something like that, like Junk Hunt Sableye and expanded with Garbodors. I don't know. What are you thinking about Heatmore?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the 2 things I was thinking of, which were the Victini and kind of this lock type of deck. I mean, it's probably not good, but it's definitely something to as you're thinking of crazy ideas, it's something in the format that provides an interesting effect. And it's always good. Just kind of a side note, a lot of cards often get lost in the shuffle because they're filler cards like the Simisear. But it's really good to have like not very good cards, but at least interesting cards that could somehow fill a niche role. And this is like pretty much the epitome of that.
No, I definitely see that for sure. I mean, we've seen cards like that. Like some of the cards recently that I think would fall in that category would be things like Alolan Sandslash to let you draw a card once per turn. It's just like stuff that can do useful things, but at face value like aren't necessarily great, but in at some point could find a place in certain decks. So
yeah, exactly.
Okay, we'll keep it moving here. We've got a Salazzle GX. No basic for this one in the set because I think this was in their Sun Moon 2+, so they didn't have a basic. So hopefully you don't pull this one in your pre-release because you won't be able to use it. But we've got Salazzle GX, 200 HP, Stage 1 Fire type. Diabolical Claws for 2 fire energy does 50 times the amount of prize cards you've already taken. And Heat Blast for 2 fires does 110. And then Queen's Haze GX for 2 fire energies. Discard all energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. You can only use 1 GX attack per game. Weakness to water, 2 retreat, no resistance. What are your thoughts here on Salazzle?
This is actually my first time seeing this card.
Oh, okay.
So, first thoughts, Heat Blast, pretty vanilla, not that great.
Yeah.
GX attack, also not that great. It's probably not quite strictly worse than Umbreon GX's GX attack, but almost certainly worse because it can only target the active.
Yep.
But Wicked Claw is actually a pretty good attack, I would say, actually. If you were playing this in something with that already had an energy acceleration, because having its cost being 2 fire is a little awkward. But, I mean, if you take 3 prizes, like Salazzle GX could very easily take your last 3 prizes.
Yep. Especially with things like Choice Band to boost damage. We have Kukui, maybe. You could even play the Lurantis promo because it's a fire type, so it boosts its damage there. I could see this being a card that you would if there was ever a Ho-Oh GX deck based around Ho-Oh's GX attack. This could be a card to throw in that as well for 2 fire energies. Not too bad.
Yeah, it very easily takes the last 2 prizes, right? If you've taken 4 prizes, you're doing 200 plus for 2 energy. That's very good.
Yeah, absolutely. So Salazzle could be something to keep in mind in the future, but right now I don't know that this could necessarily be its own deck or anything like that, like a Salazzle deck.
Right, I would agree.
Because you do have the other Salazzle that burns and poisons when you evolve, so there's some damage modifiers there. 110 for 2 fires, like Mikey said, is like just kind of meh. It's not awful, but it's not like exciting or great. Nothing to get too pumped about, I don't think. But yeah, we'll keep moving along here. We've got a Turtonator, the 130 HP basic Pokemon. Flame Cloak, 30 damage. Attach a fire energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon. And then Heat Blast, Fire Colorless, 70 damage. Anything to say about Turtonator here?
So this is almost the antithesis of what I was talking about with Heatmore. Like Heatmore is an interesting card. Turtonator is strictly worse Volcanion. It has the same amount of HP. It has a worse first attack. It has a worse second attack. It has more retreat. So, I don't even know why they printed this card. Volcanion came out, a year ago, and it was just better than it. So, I don't know. No reason you would ever play this card.
Yeah, nothing to add from me. So, we'll just we'll keep going here. We've got Alolan Vulpix for no energy. Powder Snow, flip a coin if heads. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. And then 2 colorless, Icy Snow, 20 damage. I think that's the... Oh, wait, no, that's actually 2... It's actually 2 waters.
Yeah,
if you're looking at the card. If you're looking at the translation that Pokebeach has, it says 2 colorless. But anyway, we'll keep going here. We've got Alolan Ninetales as well with Luminous Barrier. Prevent all effects of attacks, including damage, done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon EX and Pokemon GX. People who've been playing for a while will obviously remember Sigilif in the expanded format or older standard. And then we also have, I guess, Carbank as well with Safeguard. And then we've got Aurora Beam, 80 damage for Water, Colorless. I think anytime there's been a Safeguarder, it's just always been, pretty decent. I think Sigilif, that's before I started playing, but from, some videos and stuff I've seen, it seems like that was a pretty good card in that time. Carbank never did a lot in Standard, but I don't know, especially considering the other Alolan Vulpix, I think you still play that one over this one with Beacon as opposed to Powder Snow, even though maybe you play one of this one just for a niche time you want to put something to sleep, but this in combination with the Alolan Ninetales GX definitely seems like it could be good. What do you think of Alolan Ninetales?
Yeah, the Vulpix, it's a little unfortunate that the other Vulpix is just so good because otherwise this Powder Snow for free is actually pretty solid tech, but you're never gonna really want to give up Beacon. As far as the Ninetales, the one thing that I think is pretty cool is that they've kind of like, even though they've moved on to GX Pokemon, they like retroactively put in this effect that it's also safeguarded against Pokemon EX, which I think is really cool, and I wonder if that's a signal to the players that, you know, expanded is going to continue to be a thing, or maybe it means that they'll print more Pokemon EX in the future. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, Safeguard right now going into Worlds is probably not, even if you're playing Ninetales, very questionable whether it's worth a spot, just because we still have Hex Maniac in the format, we still have Garbodor in the format, and a lot of decks honestly play non-EX attackers as well. After Worlds, we lose Hex Maniac. I wish we lost Garbodor, but we don't. But I do think after Worlds, this could be much more powerful. Just Hex Maniac is in a lot of lists right now, and just the inclusion of that in decks, I think, makes this a lot less powerful. But I think without it, this has a much more potential to really wall future decks.
For sure. Okay, cool. We'll continue on here. We've got Horsea, Seadra, and Kingdra. This is a card I think that some people have been kind of talking about. We've got Horsea for Water Energy, 10 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Seadra for Water Energy, 30 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. And Kingdra is a Stage 2, 140 HP. Brine for 1 water does 90 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon that has any damage counters on it already. And then Tornado Shot for a Water Energy, 90 damage, discard a Water Energy attached to this Pokemon. This attack does 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So what do you think of Kingdra here?
When we were first looking at that, when we were first looking through the scans, like I mentioned, same night after Internationals, I was super excited for this card. And the more I talked about it to my friends, the more that they convinced me that it really wasn't that good. It's very similar. It's actually a more powerful version to a Kingdra that was very popular back in 2010, I think, from Stormfront. Okay. Now that Kingdra did like 60-20, I think, for an energy, and then had another attack. But the thing about that Kingdra is that Broken Time Space was in the format, which was, for those of you that didn't play then, it was Forest of Giant Plants for any type. So you would just, you know, turn 1 Kingdra attack. And if you could do that, like if this was a grass Pokemon or we had water of giant plants, then this would be super powerful, right? Because we could start, you know, doing 90-30 and then sniping off other things. But as is right now, it's probably a little underpowered as a Stage 2. It doesn't have a crazy amount of health. Other things have so much health that 90. I mean, listen how crazy this is, though, because like Darkrai EX won Worlds for multiple years in the past 5 years, and that did 90-30 for 3 energy. This is doing 90-30 for 1 energy, and I'm saying that it's not good enough. So, you know, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I haven't really tried it, even though I do think it does have some potential, just because I'm a little bit more skeptical of it now than I was initially.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think I'm on the same page as you. I don't think it does enough damage. If we did have something, and it also just doesn't have enough HP. If this was maybe like a GX Pokemon and its attacks maybe all did 10 more damage or something like that, 10 or 20 maybe. I don't know. I feel like if it did 110 plus 30 anywhere, that'd be really good on a GX for 1 energy, but I don't know. It's just, I don't know. Maybe if they, like you said, in the future come out with like a whirlpool of huge fish or something like that, this card could be good, but right now it just seems kind of mediocre.
Yeah, this might also be like a card after the rotation where format slows down a bit and rare candy decks can kind of find even more of a footing that this could be good. But yeah, right now I wouldn't be expecting to play against this at Worlds.
Sure. All right, we'll keep it moving here. We've got a Magikarp and a Gyarados. Magikarp, Water Energy, 10 damage to the coin of heads, prevent all effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon. And then we've got Gyarados, 150 HP, Venting Anger for 2 colorless, 50 times the number of Magikarp in your discard pile. And Splash Burn, 160 damage, Water, Colorless, 30 damage to each of your, or 160 damage, and then 30 damage to each of your benched Pokemon. Now, I know you've played a decent amount of the other Gyarados, so what do you think of this Gyarados?
Probably not that great. I mean, you're essentially, unless you do some crazy stuff with Archies, you're pretty much capping out at 150 plus whatever your damage modifiers are. But the big but to that, even though that sounds pretty good, is that if you're doing 150, that means you don't have a Magikarp on your bench.
Yeah.
Which means that if your Gyarados gets knocked out, you don't have another attacker to send up. So that's kind of the really big difference between this Gyarados and the other one, is that your damage of the other Gyarados also relies on your Magikarps, but at least once your Gyarados gets knocked out, you can send up one of your damaged Magikarps, evolve, get your other Magikarp back, and then keep swinging. This one, unless you play it with a secondary attacker where you can kind of do it every other turn, but then you're devoting a lot of space to something that you might just be able to. Turn. Yeah, and you might just be able to do it better with other cards.
Sure. I could see this Gyarados being like a one card inclusion in current Gyarados lists. I'm not sure how much play Gyarados would see at the World Championships necessarily, but I think that this could be a good card that, I haven't played Gyarados a ton, but what I have found and what I've played with it is like sometimes at the end of the game you're just kind of really low on those resources, like your Puzzle of Times and your Rescue Stretchers to get back Magikarps. So this could be a card that you just slap down and take a big, your last like 2 prizes with on like a GX or EX that you can hit 180 on. So
yeah, that's definitely true. And that's a good point about resources in Gyarados. And the other thing, most Gyarados lists actually only run 3 Gyarados, because you run so many Rescue Stretcher and whatnot. So fitting this in wouldn't even really take away from that spot. So if I was considering playing Gyarados, I would certainly mess around with a single copy of this.
For sure. But on its own, like we said, I don't think that it's going to be that great. All right, we've got a Meryl and Azumarill here. 60 HP Meryl, Bubble, flip a coin if heads. They are now paralyzed. Roll out for 2 colorless does 20. And then Azumarill, the ability Thick Fat. Any damage done to this Pokemon by your opponent's water or fire Pokemon's attacks is reduced by 30. And then Water, colorless, Waterfall does 80 damage. So what are you thinking here of Azumarill?
Not very exciting overall.
It's a cute artwork, but
cute artwork. Very very vanilla. Abilities like Thick Fat have never been very good. So
well, there was wasn't Bouffalant pretty good at one point?
Sure, but Bouffalant reduced from everything, not just water and fire.
Specific types. That's true.
Yeah.
Very true. All right, so we'll keep moving there past Azumarill. We've got round 3 of the monkeys, Pampor and Simipour. We'll skip past the baby monkey, but with the big monkey, Aqua, Reflect, 50 damage, move 1 water energy from this Pokemon to one of your benched Pokemon. It seems weird that you would want to put a water energy on this 90 HP stage 1 just to move it to something else and only do 50 damage. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, I agree.
It seems, I don't know, I don't feel like when I looked at the other 2 monkeys that we could have gotten anything that was much worse, and then I looked at this one and realized we got something that was a little worse. So, yeah, we'll have to chalk off the monkeys to the side for this one.
Yeah, maybe they'll make like monkey GXs at one point that are like meta-defining cards.
They're all just insanely good.
Yeah.
300 HP monkeys.
You know what would also be really interesting if like they all evolve, kind of like Eevee, if they all evolved from the same basic, then they might actually be good, even if they were like inherently weak cards, but then they could actually maybe be good. But alas, it's not the case.
Sadly. All right, so we've got a Bruxish here. Gnash Teeth for a water energy. The defending Pokemon is now confused. And then Synchronize, 60 damage. This attack does 20 damage to each of your opponent's benched Pokemon that has the same type as your opponent's active Pokemon. Weakness to Grass, 1 retreat. Not getting too excited about Bruxish here. It's kind of interesting. A little bit of spread damage can maybe help if your deck like has trouble hitting numbers later on in the game. Just that extra 20 damage that's already on something can be nice, but at the same time you have to attach a water and a DCE to this thing to do that. I don't know, what do you think about Bruxish?
Yeah, nothing too exciting. I mean, it's not the worst card ever. Confusion is pretty good, though it gets a little bit weaker with some of the supporters and trainers in this thing. 60 20 20 on a basic for 2 energy is really not too bad. I could I could see this maybe. I think if you draft this in a pre-release, you're gonna like
Yeah.
be like really well off. But yeah, otherwise probably not that good. But something that I do think it's worth keeping in the back of your head.
For sure.
But yeah, probably not that good.
All right, we'll keep it moving here. We've got Tapu Fini GX, 170 HP, Water type, basic Pokemon. Aqua Ring for a colorless, 20 damage. You may switch this Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. And then for a water colorless, Hydro Shot, discard 2 water energies attached to this Pokemon and do 120 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. And then we have Tapu Storm GX for 1 water energy. Shuffle your opponent's active Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your opponent's deck. If your opponent has no bench Pokemon, this attack fails. What are you thinking here, Tapu Fini GX?
I haven't given this card as much thought maybe as I should have because
Yeah,
I have.
Same as you. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, because I've heard I've seen some good players really say that they think this card is very strong, and I don't really see it. Like Aqua Ring is very weak, 20 for 1. Even with the switching effect is really not good. 120 anywhere for 3 energy is like okay.
But then
like you have
discard 2 is like
you have Aqua Patch, but like if the cost was water double colorless, I could see it, but like, and it said like discard 2 energy and not 2 water energy. It like Shaman's if Shaman was played more like it was a couple months ago, then this would be better as well, but it's not. The GX attack is interesting. It's kind of like Sylveon, but you know, it's a little bit better and a little bit worse in some ways. So I don't know. I don't think it's the greatest card ever, but like I said, I haven't experimented with it. I haven't thought about it enough. The fact that water has so much support in Rough Seas and Aqua Patch definitely has to make you really think about a card like this.
Sure.
And I don't, but I don't know. That's my summary.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. It just seems really awkward to like put 3 energies on this thing, discard 2, and then you have to have a Manaphy in play and then a Tapu Fini in the back that's got 3 energies on it as well, or like some other attacker that you're ready to go into, because it's going to be really hard to stream 2 attacks with the same Tapu Fini turn after turn. So
yeah.
All right, we'll keep it moving. We've got Pikachu and Raichu here. Moving on to the lightning types. Nothing really special to say about the Pikachu. And then we have Raichu here with the ability Evo Shock. When you play this card from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may leave your opponent's active Pokemon paralyzed. And then Volt Tackle, Lightning, colorless, 130 damage, and it does 30 to itself. 110 HP, stage 1, weak to fighting, metal resistance, and 1 retreat. I am just really glad that this card didn't exist last season whenever Toad was still in Standard. But what do you think here about Raichu?
I was really impressed. Again, this is kind of a card like Kingdra, where I was really impressed with it when I first looked at it, and then slowly, the more I've thought about it, I've become less and less enamored with it. Anytime you have auto paralyze on a card, that should like raise some red flags. Like paralyze is by far the best special condition.
Oh yeah.
So like that's a really powerful effect. But on the other hand, we'll get to Guzma later on, but that card kind of makes special conditions much weaker. So I do think that this might have a place. You could see things like you mentioned Seismitoad. You could run something like Noivern, Raichu, and we'll get to Noivern later. Any Raichu plus any type of other lock could be really interesting.
Yeah, like you said, with things such as Guzma and Acerola also being a supporter we got in this set, just really easy ways to get out of status conditions. Like this set just makes status conditions a lot weaker than they were previously. But you know, like you said, like if you did run like a Noivern Raichu deck, you have your Super Scoop Ups, you have your Acerolas, like you've got plenty of ways to continue to paralyze multiple times, right? So maybe, you know, as long as you have more paralysis options than your opponent has options to get out of paralysis, you know, there's something there. You know, if decks only run 2 or 3 Guzma, if they only run 1 or 2 Acerola, you run your scoop ups, your puzzles, like all these things to get back your resources. So I don't know, maybe there's something there.
Yeah, maybe. Definitely a card to consider. It's not bad, for sure.
Like you said, anytime something is auto paralysis, it's definitely worth looking at.
Yeah.
Same thing with anytime anything accelerates energy. I think it's worth looking at as well. But okay, right. We'll keep it moving. We've got an Electabuzz, Electivire line. 80 HP basic Pokemon Comet, or it does for a colorless Punch does 20 damage, and then we've got Thundershock, Lightning colorless, 40 damage. Flip a coin. If heads, they are paralyzed. 140 HP on the Electivire, Stage 1, Lightning double colorless, Thunder Punch 60 damage. Flip a coin. If heads, does 60 more damage. If tails, it does 20 to itself. And then Giga Impact for 2 Lightning and 2 colorless, 170 damage. This Pokemon can't attack during your next turn. 170 damage is a ton of damage on a, you know, Stage 1 non-EX, but its attack cost is so ugly.
Yeah, exactly. This is kind of like the Lightning Tangrowth of the set.
Yeah.
It's costs a lot. It's got big retreat, not that great of HP. Like you said, 170 is pretty good, but by the time you get 2 Lightnings and a double colorless on it, it's probably already dead.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll give Electivire a thumbs down for now, but
yeah.
Let's keep it moving here. We've got Tynamo, Electric, and Electros. Tynamo, 40 HP, basic Pokemon, Lightning Energy, Aqua Shock, 10 damage. If your opponent's active Pokemon has a water energy attached to it, it does 30 more damage. We've got Electric, Small Appetite, Lightning colorless. If your opponent's active Pokemon's maximum HP is 100 or more, this attack does nothing. And it seems like a really, really strange effect for them to have put on. But 140 HP on the Electros, Stage 2. Dark Clamp does 50 damage for Lightning and a colorless. Defending Pokemon can't retreat during your opponent's next turn. And Lightning colorless, Vacuum Bolt, 80 plus. You may do an additional 80 damage. If you do, this attack does 80 damage to one of your Pokemon. I don't know. I'm not too sure how I feel about this card. Like, I could see the Electros, like, you maybe would play one and expanded in the Raikou Eels deck as a non-EX attacker, but I think the Crash and Bolt one is kind of better than that. I don't know. Like, this requires less energy. You don't have to discard them, so that's something to consider with a Choice Band, or you can hit good numbers. What are you thinking here, this evolution line? Yeah,
that's exactly where my mind went to. You're never going to play an Electros deck, but yeah, an expanded, I don't know, we'd have to experiment and see a little which is better, because, like you said, Crush and Burn, is Crush and Burn 30 times?
Yes, 30, yeah. It might be 30 plus 30 more. Okay, either way, you in order to hit the numbers that this Electros hits, you're going to have to discard 5, 6, 7 energy, and this just does it for 3. And you don't really mind taking the 80 damage yourself. You can just put that on a random Raikou or whatever. So actually, I think this is definitely worth considering in the expanded Eels deck. For sure. Yeah. Outside of that, like you said, I don't think you'll ever play an Electros deck. But
yeah.
Last Lightning Pokemon here, or Electric Pokemon, to finish things off. We've got a Togedemaru with 40 HP, Rollout, 20 damage, and Electro Smash, 40 damage. Flip a coin. If heads, it does 20 more damage. I think we'll give this guy the big thumbs down, unfortunately.
Yeah.
haven't had a good Togedemaru yet, but maybe someday. I think the other one does, like, it's something with like 30 times the amount of energy attached to it, right? So maybe that one could be okay, but other than that. Okay, anyway, we've got a Slowking here. No Slowpoke, since this is one of the SM 2+ cards. That's how, you know, this goes a lot of times. They don't have the previous evolutions for their mini sets, but Slowking, 120 HP, Stage 1. For a Psychic Energy, drift ashore, search your deck for a card and put it into your hand. Shuffle your deck afterwards. And then for 3 Psychic Energies, unarmed, does 110 damage. If you have no cards in your hand, this Pokemon can use this attack even without the required energy. So kind of interesting. Actually, this is the first time I've read this card. So
yeah, same.
What do you think about Slowking?
Yeah, first time I'm reading it too. Initial impressions. I mean, Drift Ashore is not bad. Anytime you have an attack that says search your deck for any card, it's not terrible. And unarmed, if you can do 110 for free for no energy cost. That's pretty good. Playing your hand down to 0 though is A, risky, and B, very difficult.
Yeah, especially to do it continually.
Right. So you can play cards like a Rangaroo that'll let you draw back up. But yeah,
Playing
just
back down to
actually
0.
yeah, it's actually pretty difficult if you don't, you only have 4 Ultra Balls in your deck, and that's going to be your most consistent way of discarding cards. So probably not that good, but definitely interesting card.
Sure. All right, we'll keep it moving. We've got Wobbuffet here, 120 HP, basic Pokemon, 3 Psychic Energy, Shadowy, not 50 times. It does 50 damage for each colorless in your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost. I think this card could be good if its attack cost wasn't 3 Psychic Energies.
Yeah, even if it was 2 Psychics, it might be okay.
Yeah,
but 3 is a little too much.
We have things like, especially as, even after rotation, like in the expanded format, we'd have things like the Aqua Base that adds a colorless to your opponent's retreat cost. We've got like a Alolan Dugtrio that adds a colorless to your opponent's retreat cost. Like, we have ways to make this card do more damage, but 3 Psychic is just terrible. Like, I mean, even if it was like 2 Psychic and a colorless, then you can use like Dimension Valley and expand it or something like that. But I guess if you do that, you're not using Aqua Base, so not a lot going for Wobbuffet.
Yeah, probably not good.
All right, so we've got Seviper here. This is actually a card I think is pretty solid. Ability, more poison, put 1 more damage counter on your opponent's poisoned Pokemon between turns. And then Venomous Fangs for a Psychic and double colorless, 30 damage. They are now poisoned.
Presumably this stacks as well, right?
Yes. As far as we know, there's nothing about you can't use more than 1 more poison ability per turn or anything like that. So throw a couple Sevipers down on your bench, and if you're using a deck that poisons, like, I don't know, in standard, like maybe something with the Alolan Muck and Salazzle or something like that. This can help you hit numbers if you have 1 or 2 of these guys down. And expanded, this basically makes it so like Hypnotoxic Laser is a trainer that does 20 damage, so that's not bad either. But sorry, go ahead.
No, there's also, I don't remember exactly what they do, but there was some poison support a couple sets ago, right? There's like a Toxicroak that was pretty...
That's right, yes.
That did something with poison.
I think that its ability is like it can't be damaged if your opponent's active is poisoned. Maybe. That might be what it is.
Right, so it's interesting to see, we had Hypnotoxic Laser in Burbank City for a long time as like poison support, quote unquote. And so we've had like a couple random poison support cards over the next set, and maybe this is the card that kind of brings it all together. So I don't know, definitely, I agree. Definitely a very interesting card and worth looking into. Off the top of my head right now, I don't know exactly what the best way to use it is, but definitely solid.
I mean, it can be good in some of these lock decks as well to make it so it can help you modify your numbers to make it so your opponent's Pokemon gets knocked out coming into your turn. It's a Psychic type, so like I know you've played a Silgor a lot, so if you deck and cover into a Wobbuffet, this is a Psychic type, so its ability stays, so there's another damage modifier there. But I know your bench space is so valuable in that deck as well.
Yeah.
But, interesting card for sure. We've got Duskull, Dusclops, and Dusknoir. Duskull, for Psychic Energy, Dark Guidance, put a basic Pokemon from your discard pile onto your bench. We've got Dusclops, Night Room, 1 damage counter on each Pokemon. Excuse me, both yours and your opponent's.
Interesting.
And then Ambush 30 plus, flip a coin, it does 30 more. And then we've got Dusknoir here, Stage 2, 150 HP. Ability Dark Invitation. Once during your turn before you attack, you may look at your opponent's hand, put a basic Pokemon you find there onto your opponent's bench, and put 3 damage counters on that Pokemon. And then Mind Jack, 30 plus for a Psychic and double colorless. This does 30 more damage for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Weakness to Darkness, a retreat cost of 3. Thoughts on Dusknoir?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting card. It's definitely not bad. I don't know if it'll be competitively viable, but the ability is pretty good. Like you can, for 2 reasons, right? You can, well, for maybe more than 2 reasons. 1, you fuel your own Mind Jack attack. 2, just putting damage counters on whatever Pokemon you pull. And 3, you can pull basic Pokemon that they would not necessarily want to play down. The first one that comes to mind, obviously, is Tapu Lele, right? If they're saving Tapu Lele for their turn, you just pull that down. Maybe you've left them with a dead hand now. It is a more powerful Mind Jack attack than Zoroark has. Currently, at only by 20 more damage, but you have pretty high HP. 150 on a non-EX is pretty good. And its babies, Duskull and Dusclops, aren't completely useless. Duskull's put a basic from your discard pile onto your bench is not terrible, and Dusclops being able to spread some damage itself, maybe before you get to Dusknoir, is actually pretty good. I don't think that this will be a competitively viable deck right away, but maybe in the future, for sure.
Yeah. For sure. All right, we'll keep moving. Krogunk and Toxicroak here. Krogunk Corkscrew Smash for 60, for a colorless does 10, and then Frog Hop for Psychic Colorless, 20 damage, flip a coin. If heads, does 20 more. Then we've got Toxicroak Stage 1, Poison Jab for a Psychic Colorless, 30 damage. They are now poisoned, so that could be a modifier there with your Seviper maybe. And then Poison Boost Psychic Colorless, 80 plus. If this Pokemon is poisoned, this attack does 80 more damage. Then remove that special condition from this Pokemon. Weakness to Psychic, Retreat of 2, and no resistance. So the first thing that comes to mind for me, obviously, is going to be the Ariados from Ancient Origins that poisons both you and the active Pokemon. And then 80 plus 80 is, that's 160 plus 10 from the poison. That's your 170 damage, which will knock out, not a bad number to hit. I think 180 is the better number right now, though. So that's where the Viper. Exactly. So, but the attack cost is kind of awkward with Psychic Colorless. But what do you think here of Toxicroak?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. If it's Poison Boost with Psychic double Colorless, I actually think that this could be a very good card.
Right.
With Psychic Colorless, it's probably not good enough. So who knows? Someone might build an interesting deck with it.
Yeah, in the expanded format, you can use something like Dimension Valley to make it so you just have to have 2 Psychics on the Pokemon. Right. Psychic weakness also right now is not that great, but on 110 HP Pokemon, the weakness isn't going to matter necessarily that much all the time.
Yeah.
So we'll keep it moving here. We've got a Venipede, Whirlipede, and Scolipede. Venipede, nothing really... I mean, I guess Venoshock, colors 20 damage. If your opponent's active Pokemon is poisoned, this attack does 40 more damage, so 60 for a DCE maybe.
Yeah,
then we've got Whirlipede, 90 HP, Stage 1. Spin turn, 30 damage, switch it with one of your bench Pokemon. Roll out, does 60. And then we've got Scolipede here with Poison Horn, 80 damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. And Steamroller, 140 damage. This attack's damage isn't affected by resistance. Retreat of 4, weakness to Psychic. 160 HP. What do you think, Scolipede?
I think the basic is the best of them.
I'll agree with you there.
I actually think that what is it? Venoshock is actually not too bad. Because the Ariados that you mentioned before, you can poison them, and then you're hitting for 70. If they're Psychic weak, you're hitting for 120, which coincidentally is enough to one-shot the dreaded Garbodor. So I don't know. The evolutions are not very good, but the basic could find a niche use.
Yeah, that's interesting that for just a DCE, if you have a way to poison in your deck, like this just knocks out a Garbodor, which is really good numbers for you. So
yeah.
Okay, we'll keep going here. Esper and Meowstic. Esper, Misleading Eyes. The defending Pokemon's weakness is now Psychic until the end of your next turn. The amount of weakness doesn't change. I don't know why it adds that effect. I guess maybe if it was already weak to Psychic, it would double. People might think it would double up, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Then we've got Meowstic here. Allure for a Psychic, draw 3 cards, and Hand Kinesis 10 times. This attack does 10 damage times the number of cards in your hand. We have cards similar to this in the format right now. I think, coincidentally, there's the Semi-Sage, Semi-Poor, and Semi-Seer that have like Hand Fling or something like that from Breakthrough that do the exact same thing. We've got the Metagross that does something similar from Ancient Origins. It's like a Stage 2 or something like that. and none of those cards have ever seen much play. I can't think of much of a reason that, I mean, outside of maybe the attack on the basic, I can't think of much of a reason that would make this card played over those two.
It's just so hard to keep enough cards in your hand at the end of the turn for that to do a significant amount of damage. Like, you literally need to have 10 cards in your hand in order to reliably two-shot
stuff,
most things. So, yeah, and that's just too hard.
Especially with cards like in the format later on in the game, you're just it's gonna be hard to get a lot of cards in your hand. All right, coming up here, we've got a Sandygast, Absorb Life, 10 damage, heal 10 from this Pokemon, and Palisand, 130 HP Psychic Pokemon, Sand Tomb for a Psychic and 2 colorless, 80 damage, defending Pokemon can't retreat, and then for 4 colorless energy, Dust Storm, 100 damage, discard all cards attached to both players' active Pokemon. So you put 4 energies on this guy just to discard them all, but you get to discard your opponents. So what do you think of Palisand?
I mean, if there was a competitive deck that really tried to go like all in with their energies on one guy, then this could be a decent counter to that. But there isn't. Every good deck kind of like spreads around their energy, so it's probably not good.
I will agree with you there. Moving along, we've got Necrozma GX, one of the cards I think I'm most excited for out of this set. I think this card is very, very good. 180 HP, basic Pokemon. Ability, Light's End. Prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from colorless Pokemon, both yours and your opponents. Not a bad ability at all, especially looking at the Worlds format. A lot of people have talked about things like Rayquaza. You know, Shaman is still a card, so you don't take that 30 from Sky Return, potentially. Then we've got Prismatic Burst for 3 colorless, 10 damage plus, discard all psychic energy attached to this Pokemon. This attack does 60 more damage for each energy card discarded in this way. And then Black Ray GX for 3 colorless energy. This attack does 100 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon EX and Pokemon GX, not affected by weakness, resistance, any other effects on the defending Pokemon, so on and so forth. Weakness to Psychic and a 2 retreat cost. I think Necrozma is a very, very good card.
I can agree with that. Funny story before we talk about it too much. One of my friends he's a guy I knew in high school. He's been messaging me recently because he's trying to get into the game, and he's been looking at these scans and whatnot. And he messages me. He's like, "How do you beat Necrozma GX?" And I'm like, "Attack it with a non-colorless Pokemon." Like, I don't know. I didn't know what he was talking about. And he's like, "Oh, the site that I was reading had a mistranslation. It just said from all Pokemon." And I'm like, that would be insanely good.
That would be really crazy, especially with Hex Maniac rotating. Like, everything has to play Garbodor, basically.
Yeah, that would be crazy. But for this card, there's a lot of different ways you could play this, and I don't know what the optimal way is right now. The fact that it just takes 3 colorless for both its attacks really gives it options. The only way that I've tried it so far is with Metagross GX, and actually kind of flipping the emphasis from Metal Energy onto Psychic Energy. So running I think I was running like 8 Psychic, 3 or 4 Metal, and the idea was to try and make Metagross more competitive against Volcanion by using, making your primary attacker not metal. Black Ray GX is pretty good against Volcanion. You can usually hit for 300 or 400 damage with it. Prism Burst is also pretty good for if you just put 3 Psychics on it, you're one-shotting almost everything in their deck unless they play Fighting Fury Belt. And it was okay. It was still like slightly worse than 50-50 against Volcanion, but interesting for sure. I don't know, what other ways have you thought about playing?
So one of the ways I've tested it so far is I've been playing one in Gardevoir GX actually. I think a lot of times if you can definitely take one-hit KOs with Gardevoir, but if you miss a one-hit KO on something, like later on in the game, Black Ray GX becomes a really nice way to potentially take multiple prizes in a turn, or even if you do it early, it makes it really easy for you to knock out stuff later on in the game. So I like that method a lot. I didn't play back in this time, but I have played you know, some older format decks with people at tournaments and stuff like that. And this reminds me a lot of Rayquaza Star from the like 2006 Meta Knight deck, where you just throw a ton of energy on it at the end of the game and just come in and take multiple prizes, or just set up a bunch of knockouts for later on. So this, I just think this card is really, really solid.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Rayquaza Star. I actually played, when I was younger, 2005 and 2006, both of those World Championships, I played Rayquaza Star in my deck.
Okay.
I played it first year. Both years were with Electro DX. One year was with is a deck called ZRE, Zapdos, Rayquaza, Electro, and the other year was with Dark Tyranitar. Yeah, Rayquaza Star is extremely powerful, and I agree. This reminded me of that. Could be really good. I've thought about the idea of putting this in like a Garbodor Drampa deck, since you're playing Psychics, you're playing double colorless, so it kind of has a nice fit into that. If you run Ninja Boy, you can attack with Drampa for a while, Ninja Boy into this, do 100 to all their things. I'm sure we'll see the Tapu Lele probably very soon, but I think this also combos really nicely with the new Tapu Lele card. That's
actually we can pull it up, but it's a promo, so it's not.
Oh, okay, okay. So the new Tapu Lele for a Psychic and a colorless energy lets you move damage counters around however you want on your opponent's side of the field. So after a Black Ray GX that maybe has hit 3 or 4 of their Pokemon. Especially if you hit 4, like if you do 400, then Tapu Lele can knock out 2 of those Pokemon the following turn just by transferring 100 from each of them, which is potentially a really deadly combo.
Yeah, for sure. I like this card a lot. It's probably one of my favorites from the set. Like I said, I just think the 3 colorless on both its attacks, like you said, makes it so splashable. Like you can literally play it in anything. I like it in Gardevoir because you can just out of nowhere bench it, attach a DCE, Secret Spring a Fairy onto it, and you're swinging for 100 everywhere. I don't know. It just seems really, really strong.
Yeah, I agree.
But we will move on from Necrozma and on to a less exciting GX card, Machamp GX. 250 HP. Fighting, cross-cut, 60 damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is an evolution Pokemon. It does 60 more damage, so maybe not the worst thing with things like strong energy and stuff like that existing. And evolution Pokemon being so popular. We've got Bedrock Breaker, 130 damage, discard any stadium in play for 3 fighting, and Muscle Punch GX for 3 fighting, 180 damage. This attack's damage isn't affected by resistance. What do you think of Machamp?
Yeah. The fact that all of its attacks only take fighting energy is like the first thing that jumps out to me is like not very good. Yeah, I don't know. Even its GX attack isn't very good. Like 180 for 3 fighting is not strong. 3 fighting for 130 is not strong. Even on a basic, even if this was a basic Pokemon, I don't think it would be very good. Yeah. And the fact that it's a stage 2 is just pretty terrible.
I think that maybe like if the Carbink that we have, if its ability was like the new Ninetales and stuff like that, where it couldn't be affected by GXs or EXs, then maybe you could see something here with Machamp GX, because if you get 3 fightings on this guy, all of its attacks are pretty decent, like especially with strong energies and Choice Band, and even in expanded with something like Fighting Stadium, or we have Regirock EX still. There's a lot of damage modifiers out there for you, but yeah, I don't know. I just I don't think there's much going for this guy right now.
The rainbow card looks pretty cool, though.
It does. We'll take a look at those at the end real quick. But continuing on, we've got something you mentioned earlier. We've got the Rhyperior line. Rhyhorn here, 60 colorless 20 damage, fighting colorless 60 damage. Rhydon, Rock Tumble does 80, not affected by resistance. Megahorn 120, flip a coin of tails, it does nothing. And then Rhyperior, I don't think you'll ever, like, if you're playing a Rhyperior deck, you're never attacking with these things. You're using it for the ability here, Toppling Wind. When you play this card from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. And then Rock Wrecker, 170 damage, not affected by weakness resistance. Yeah, this obviously same ability as a Aggron from Dragons Exalted and Expanded. Also a beefy Stage 2 that has the exact same ability. And I think that card's, like, like I said, I didn't play back then, but from what I've seen from like videos and articles and stuff from the past, it seems like that card saw some play in some rogue decks, but never really had any great performances at larger tournaments. But what do you think here about Rhyperior?
Yeah, I mean, you're pretty accurate with how much Aggron was played. Typically, deck-out decks have not been very successful in the competitive Pokemon scene for a number of reasons, one being time, and two just being like other strategies can often just win the game before you're able to pull off your deck-out strategy. Mm-hmm. Rhyperior is pretty I've always really liked deck-out decks. I played one of the few deck-out decks that was successful was a Flygon level X deck back in like 2009 that me and some of my teammates pioneered, and it was quite good. So I've always had an affinity for these type of cards. So I really like the Rhyperior, especially with some of the trainers that we get in this set. That we'll see Super Scoop Up being reprinted, Acerola. Make it actually competitively viable, or potentially competitively viable, I should say. 160 HP is quite a lot for a stage 2, so you can evolve to Rhyperior, and a lot of times they won't be able to one-shot it, which means that you will be able to Acerola it back to your hand and then replay it for its effect. I don't know. There's something that I want to experiment a little bit with. Xander Perot, in his latest Six Prides article that came out last week, had a list where it was like 444 Rhyperior, 2 Houndoom EX, and then a bunch of other stuff. And so I want to talk to him about it a little bit and maybe try and figure out a list, because I do like these type of decks, and I don't want to write it off right away.
For sure. All right, we will look here at Lunatone and Solrock. We'll just talk about these as a pair because they always go together. But Lunatone here, heal block. If you have Solrock in play, Pokemon both yours and your opponents can't be healed. So kind of interesting, I guess. And then Solrock here, Lunatone's attack, fighting colorless, 30 damage. And then Solrock, double draw for colorless, draw 2 cards. And for fighting energy, 20 damage. Plus, if there's any stadium card in play, this attack does 20 more damage. Not seeing much for these guys.
Yeah, there's been, like, the Lunatone Solrock combinations are always interesting to think about. There was one time where they were really, really good back in, like, 2006.
Yeah, it was a Worlds deck, wasn't it? There was like one juniors or seniors, maybe, I think?
Yeah, so there was like there was that full Lunatone Solrock deck, which was pretty good. But then there was also other decks would sometimes just play one Lunatone, one Solrock for the abilities as well, because I think it like shut off some type of abilities or something like that. But yeah, these shutting off healing is not that good. There was a Bronzong that did that, and it never saw play. Yeah, I don't know. Unfortunately, healing is not a big part of the game, so stopping healing is also never going to be a big part of the game.
Sure. All right, so we'll move past the Sun and the Moon here and onto Riolu and Lucario. Nothing really to mention on the Riolu, but Lucario here, stage 1, 120 HP fighting type, ability Stance. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may prevent all effects of your opponent's attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon, until the end of your opponent's next turn. And then Submarine Blow, 120 damage, 3 fightings. No other effects. Am I not mistaken in saying that there was a Lucario, like, didn't Lucario level X have a power that was the same as this?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So, but Lucario had decent attacks back then.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I think that the ability is obviously, could be pretty good, but unfortunately, Submarine Blow is just not a very good attack with 3 fighting cost.
Yeah. It's not gonna be any good, unfortunately.
All right, we've got a Sock here for a fighting energy. Quick Guard during your opponent's next turn prevents all damage done to this Pokemon by your opponent's basic Pokemon. And Brick Bake, 40 damage, not affected by weakness, resistance, or other effects. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah, no good. It's like the Metal Cobalion with its first attack, but just worse. Because worse HP, worse second attack. So, no good.
Alright, Crabballer and Crabominable here. Light Punch, 40 damage on the basic, and then Stage 1, Gusty Hammer for a fighting energy, 80 damage, does damage to itself equal to the number of damage counters on it already. And then for 3 fightings, double stomp, 80 damage, flip 2 coins, that does 40 more for each heads. I don't know, 80 for 1 with things like Strong Energy, Regirock, and Choice Band doesn't seem awful, but you know, even if this thing has 40 damage on it from like an energy drive or something like that, you're just gonna hit yourself. So.
Yeah, I do think this is pretty good. 80 for 1 is pretty good, like you said, and you could be hitting upwards of 130 for 1 energy. Maybe more with Regirox. You pair this with something like the Evolutions and give you a bunch of different types. You can really be one-shotting a lot of things. 140 HP is not bad. 140 HP is good for a stage 1, but it's kind of lower than that, right? Because of the attack. I don't know. This is definitely an interesting card. One of my friends that is also qualified for Worlds has sent me a Crabominable list. So I haven't tested it all, but I think it's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, 80 for 1, not bad at all, especially with all the damage modifiers we have. All right, we'll keep it moving here. Lycanroc, we've got 2 different Lycanrocs actually. No Rockruffs though in the set, but 2 Lycanrocs. First one is the Midnight form, Dangerous Claws 30+. If it's a basic Pokemon, does 30 more damage for 1 fighting. And then Corner, 90 damage, fighting colorless, colorless. Defending Pokemon can't retreat. And then we've got the other Lycanroc, Rock Throw, fighting colorless, 30 damage. And then a Cell Rock, fighting colorless, 100 damage. Anything you want to say about either of these guys?
Nah, they're both pretty mediocre.
We'll keep it moving then. Try to finish this thing off. We've got Mudbray and Mudsdale here. Stomp, 20 damage for the coin. If heads, does 20 more. And Mudsdale, Stage 1, 130 HP. Kick away, 60 damage. Switch your opponent's Pokemon with one of their benched Pokemon for 3 colorless. And a Vigorous Dash for fighting and 3 colorless. 130 damage, 30 damage. This attack does 30 damage to this Pokemon and 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. The second attack seems decent, but same thing that we said about some of these other Stage 1 and Stage 2 Pokemon. It's like its attack cost is just really, really poor.
Yeah, it's very hindering. I do want to note, not only have I never seen either of these cards, I've never seen either of these Pokemon. I have no idea that these were Pokemon at all.
There was a Mudsdale in a Guardians Rising.
I probably skimmed over. This has actually been very good. It was
equally as terrible, if it makes you feel like it also had a 4 energy 2 attack cost or something like that. So
this whole going through the set with you has been I've learned at least 5 new Pokemon just doing this. So this has been pretty good.
I'm glad I could help you out there, man. Let's see. Hey, you recognize this guy, right? Passimian here, because
I do recognize
he's been
that.
a deck. So
yeah.
Comet Punch, 30 damage, no other effects, and Intentional Grounding. 90 damage, discard a Pokemon tool from your hand. If you can't, this attack does nothing. Really strange requirement there for the attack. With the other Passimian existing, like this one is just actually strictly worse.
Yeah, probably never see play.
Yeah. We've got Marshadow GX, pretty cool GX card here with the ability Shadow Hunt. This Pokemon can't use attack. This Pokemon, can use the attacks of basic Pokemon in your discard pile. So you just throw something in the discard pile that's a basic. You get to use the attack, but you still have to have the necessary energy to use the attack. And then we've got Beatdown, 120 damage for 2 fightings and a colorless, and Peerless, 100 blows for a fighting energy, 50 damage. Does 50 damage times the amount of basic energy attached to this Pokemon. 150 HP on the basic. When I first looked at this card, it seemed pretty poor to me in Standard. It can be good as a counter to maybe some Darkrai decks, potentially, if like that was something you expected to see a lot of play at the World Championships or post-rotation. But obviously I think the big thing that people are thinking about is in the expanded format in combination with Night March, being able to throw away your Night Marchers, and then also with the fighting support we haven't expanded, things like Karina and Focus Sash, getting to throw Focus Sash on this guy to prevent it from getting knocked out in one hit. What do you think about Marshadow?
Yeah, I also agree with Oricorio and Karen both being hard counters to Night March. This gives it a little bit more life, I would say. I do think in Standard right now it might have a place in some decks because it can one-shot Darkrai's and it can one-shot Drampas, which
yes, true as well.
Like Drampa It really depends on what deck you are playing, because if your deck really struggles with the Drampa and you have a basic Pokemon that maybe I can't think of a basic Pokemon off the top of my head that like does 90 for a double colorless or even 60 for a double colorless, that where you could do like Marshadow, double colorless Choice Band, and one shot. But I do think it's worth thinking about. Probably
just like Tapu Lele. I think that's the first thing I can. That's like the main thing I can think of.
Yeah, the Lele doesn't have for weakness.
Lele that's true as well. Yep, that's right. Yep.
Yeah,
because you copy the effects as well as the attack.
Right. So it's worth thinking about. But yeah, I agree. It's probably not going to see too much play in the standard format.
But expanded, definitely something to keep your eye out for.
Expanded,
I'll pick up a playset solely for the expanded format. Like, I doubt I'll be playing this in standard anytime soon.
Right.
But you never know. They release a really strong basic Pokemon that you just need to have a fighting type attacker in as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We've got an Alolan Rattata here and Alolan Raticate. Focus energy during your next turn. This Pokemon's bite attack base damage is 60, and then bite for a dark energy is 10 damage. And then we have Alolan Raticate here, 120 HP, stage 1, with Reinforced Fang, 10 damage. If this Pokemon has a Pokemon Tool card attached to it, this attack does 50 more damage. Hyper Fang does 60 damage, flip a coin if tails. This attack does nothing. Weakness to fighting, a retreat of 3, and a psychic resistance. I don't think that the second attack is good at all, but for no energy, the first attack actually seems kind of interesting to me.
For 60 for 0?
Yes, 60 for 0, plus like you have to have a tool attached, so if you have a choice band, that's 90 for no energy. And especially since this guy's a stage 1, you throw the evolutions in there. There's something you could hit for some weaknesses for actually 0 energy. So and I think there's another Alolan Rattata that has free retreat. So that one would be, and that one has an attack that does 20 damage for no energy as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so. I think that's correct. Yeah, I haven't given. I guess similar to the Crab Brawler or Crab Abominable or whatever. Yeah. It's a decent stage one that hits for very cheap and good damage. So yeah, definitely considerable card.
We'll keep it going here. We've got Alolan Grimer and Alolan Muck GX. Alolan Grimer here, Division for no energy. Search your deck for an Alolan Grimer and put it onto your bench. Then shuffle your deck. Really, really solid setup attack here.
Yeah, very good.
Slippery Sludge for a double colorless. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Potentially a good attack as well. And Retreat of 3, worth mentioning since, once again, you could use Heavy Ball with this guy. We've got Alolan Muck GX, 220 HP, Darkness type Stage 1 Pokemon with Chemical Breath for a dark and 2 colorless energy. 10 plus, this attack does 70 more damage for each special condition affecting your opponent's active Pokemon. And then we've got Crunch, 120 damage for 2 dark, 2 colorless, discard 1 energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. And then Tri-Hazard GX for no energy. First time we've seen a GX attack cost 0 energy. Choose one of your opponent's benched Pokemon and switch it with their active Pokemon. The new active Pokemon is now poisoned, burned, and paralyzed. Weakness to fighting, psychic resistance, and a retreat of 4. Any thoughts here on Alolan Muck GX?
It's nice that we have like the other Alolan Muck, because otherwise I think that this would be completely unviable. But I mean, the other Alolan Muck is very good. So like we would play that. Like you said, the Alolan Grimer has a very good free attack. GX is okay. Like Tri-Hazard, as we've talked about a little bit, special conditions are much weaker right now than they ever have been. Crunch is way too costly of an attack to ever use. Chemical Press is okay. You know, you really need 2 special conditions for it to really to be doing significant damage, but even 180 for 2 and like a dark and a double colorless isn't terrible. I don't know. I don't think it's a very good card, but it's an interesting card. Therefore, I could be proven wrong.
I think that something it really misses a lot is any form of like I think if there was a way to stream attacks continually on an Alolan Muck, this card would be a lot better, but the dark double colorless cost makes it kind of awkward to where if one goes down and you didn't get a chance to get any energies on your back Alolan Mucks, it's going to be really tough for you. You're going to be basically a turn behind. But that also makes me think that in Expanded, since it's a Dark-type Pokemon, you could use something like Dark Patch to try to accelerate a little energy. In Expanded, you obviously also have Hypnotoxic Laser, which is a trainer that could potentially give you those 2 status conditions. But once again, it's basically going to be a coin flip if you do 80 damage or 150 damage. You know?
Right.
So,
and those coin flips could like decide games more so than Laser already does.
Right, exactly. Yeah, very true. But like you said, the obviously already existing Alolan Muck is very good in this as well. Just being able to, shutting off abilities is always going to be good to some degree. Yeah, I think this card is kind of like I think it's a card that definitely has potential. But right now, it just, like, in Standard, the only things that we have that really inflict status conditions are going to be the Salazzle, Stage 1, but you're going to have to place things like Devolution Spray to continue to get that condition. You also have Raichu that we talked about earlier. That's something that could get this condition out there. You have Ariados, also a Stage 1, but that poisons you. And then one other thing, what was I the Hypno that puts both active to sleep.
Puts both to sleep, yeah.
I think that might be it as far as like abilities and things that put Pokemon to sleep. So those are your options for partners, but
and I think of those, Salazzle is probably the most appealing because it does the 2 conditions.
Exactly, yeah.
So, and I guess you hit pretty significant damage then, right? Because you're doing 150 from the attack plus the at least 30 from the special condition. So you're hitting 180. Choice Band, you're doing 210.
Yep.
So I guess that's not terrible.
And you can also do the Seviper as well, give you that extra 10 damage to let you hit 20. If you put 2 Sevipers out there... Oh, wait, no. I was going to say that would let you kill the Guardy, but unfortunately Guardy is resistant to Dark. So, so, I don't know. We just tried really hard to make this card seem good, and it just still seems pretty mediocre. We'll move on past it. I think, like I said, like in Expanded, this could be a little bit better just because of that energy acceleration. You could use something like EXP Share to get energies back on your back guy, but then you're not able to use a Choice Band, so it becomes kind of awkward. But anyway, we've got a Sneasel and a Weavile here. Nothing, well, I guess Home Claws, colorless. During your next turn, this Pokemon's slash attack base damage is 80, and then slash 20 damage for their next attack. And then the Weavile, Dark Awakening, 60 damage to every Pokemon in play that has an ability, and slash 70 damage. And also a free retreat cost. So lots of things out there do have abilities right now, but there's also a decent amount of Pokemon that don't have abilities. So the fact that this is a colorless cost as well, and it has free retreat, makes me feel like it's something you could splash in to help you hit some numbers potentially. But being an evolution, it's a little harder than if this was just a basic that did 60 to everything with abilities. That'd be really, really good. But being a evolution, I don't know, it seems a lot weaker compared to that.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely weaker, but it's still pretty decent. I was, as we were doing this, I pulled up the list of cards that I intend to buy before Worlds, and this made my list. 4/4 Weavile made my list, because especially against like a Gardevoir deck. They're playing, they're going to have at least 1 or 2 Gardevoirs. They're going to have an Octillery. They're going to have probably a Tapu Lele. So already that's, 180 to 240 damage for a single energy. You're probably going to get one shot back. But, I don't know. We've seen a lot of spread damage support, I feel like, over the last couple sets between the Tapu Koko, the Haunch Crow. So this kind of just adds to that. And I don't know. I've always been a fan of spread decks as well, so this is something that I want to at least play around with before totally dismissing it.
For sure. All right, we'll continue on here to the Darkrai, non-GX Darkrai. Basic Pokemon, 120 HP. Dark and colorless Hypnoblast, 30 damage. The opponent's active is now asleep. And then for a Dark and a double colorless, Darkrai does 80 damage if your opponent has used their GX attack. This attack does 80 more damage. So seems like a decent one prize attacker in like a Turbo Dark deck.
Sure.
But with that condition of your opponent has to have used their GX attack. there's some decks out there existing now that don't even have GX attacks or that will rarely use them. Like Garbodor decks aren't always going to use their Big Wheel GX necessarily. Rayquaza doesn't have a GX attack in the deck. Volcanian's not necessarily always going to have to Nitro Tank, and if they do, it's going to be towards the end of the game, so this guy's going to be pretty, not that great. But there are decks that can use their GX attacks early, such as Espeon Garbodor, but I guess they probably use it less early against Darkrai because you're not knocking stuff out, so I don't know. What do you think here?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting mechanic, and I hope we see more things like, what's the supporter? Hala. That kind of go with this theme of, if you use your GX attack, then it has this extra effect, or if your opponent used this. So I hope we continue to see this mechanic, but I don't think that this card is very good overall.
All right, we will continue on here to Darkrai GX, 180 HP basic Pokemon with the ability Resurrection. Once during your turn before you attack, if this card is in your discard pile, you may play this card to your bench and attach 1 Dark Energy from your discard pile to this card. Then Dark Rift for 2 Dark and a Colorless, 130 damage. This attack's damage isn't affected by resistance. And then Dead End GX for 2 Darks and a Colorless. If your opponent's active Pokemon is affected by a special condition, that Pokemon is now knocked out. Weakness to Fighting, Resistance to Psychic, and a 2 Retreat. I'll let you talk about this card real quick if you want to.
Sure. I don't think this will have a huge impact in the standard format. I think the current Turbo Dark decks will probably play 1 copy of it, just as like a way to get an extra damage or an extra 20 damage. But 130 is pretty vanilla. It's almost always going to be worse than Dark Pulse, and its GX attack, unless you're playing Ariados in the standard format, you're not really, or like Salazzle or something like that, you're never really going to get that off. So it's almost strictly used for the ability in standard. In expanded, whole different story.
Totally different story.
Yeah, like this card is possibly insane. I think it'll take some time really to like iron out what lists including this will look like, but you can be assured that it's going to be running like 4 Battle Compressor to get this and energy in the discard right away, to just pop it off and go. Like this key, I think this totally redefines the word turbo in the deck, Turbo Dark.
Yep, very easy turn 1 to get off an attack for, like, if you're playing, like, example here, Dark Rift 130, and you're playing things like Dark Patch and Max Elixir, very easy to get a Darkrai down in the discard. Resurrection, put it on the bench. Dark Patch once, attach for turn once, or Max Elixir once, attach for turn once. Then use something such as a Hypnotoxic Laser along with Verbank City Gym. That gives you a special condition to potentially use the GX attack on the first turn. But also, with a Choice Band, that lets you hit 190, which is a really good number to hit as well, knocking out things such as Ho-Oh, Turtonator, Lapras, and anything that has less HP than that, obviously. So, I mean, in Expanded, just having the option turn 1 to hit that much damage or just knock anything out is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But I would tend to agree with you that it really probably won't have much of an effect in the standard format.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting that the two of these GXs that we've talked about, Marshadow and Darkrai, are going to potentially have huge impacts in the expanded format and almost no impact potentially in the standard format.
Yeah, no kidding. Darkrai is just, they both are very, very good. And obviously, like, Marshadow, is a fighting type, so it hits for weakness. So it's just like, it just makes Expanded even, like, Expanded was such a fast format compared to Standard already, I think. And, like, these cards just, like you said, redefine, like, the turbo. Yeah, it's just like, it's going to be fast, back and forth. Best of 3's no longer an issue at these tournaments. Like, it's so easy to finish games, but... let's just continue on here to Inkay and Malamar. Inkay here has an attack restrict for Dark Energy. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. And then Malamar, 100 HP, stage 1, Psybeam does 20 damage. They are now confused. And for a Dark Double Colorless, Energy Slosh, 70 damage. You may move all energy from this Pokemon to one of your benched Pokemon. Anything to say about Malamar?
Not really. Most of the Malamars have not been very good, and this is no exception.
If, like I said earlier with the other thing, that Paralyzed is an evolution. If there's ever a good Malamar or a Malamar GX or anything like that, this is probably going to be the Inkay you're going to want to use, and assuming that the other one they bring isn't going to be better, just because you have that option to constrict. But moving on here, on to the fairy types, and on to easily the most hyped card in the set. We've got the Gardevoir GX Evolution line. Ralts here. Draining Kiss, heal 10 damage from this Pokemon for 1 fairy. Curlia, Smack does 20 damage, and Magical Shot does 30 damage, and then Gardevoir GX 230, excuse me, 230 HP, Stage 2 Fairy type Pokemon with the ability Secret Spring. Once during your turn before you attack, you may attach 1 Fairy energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon. Really good energy acceleration there. We've got Infinite Force for 1 fairy, 30 damage. This attack does 30 damage times the amount of energy attached to both active Pokemon. And then Twilight GX for 1 fairy. Search your discard pile for 10 cards, show them to your opponent, and shuffle them back into your deck. You can only use 1 GX attack per game. Weakness to Metal, Resistance to Dark, and a 2 Retreat. Now, I think that when people started testing the Worlds format, pretty much everyone's testing started with this card. Infinite Force, an insanely strong attack. Secret Spring, obviously, being a very good ability as well. It also did just win the most recent Japanese Mega Battle, I believe. They're like national championships, so obviously a deck that's done well over there. And I think that that's where a lot of people have started their lists, is based off of the deck that we saw do well there. But I'm sure this is a card that you've looked at a lot. What do you think of Gardevoir GX?
Yeah, we could write novels about this card. It's that good. And actually, Travis Nunless just did his article, just came out with, and it's just all about Gardevoir.
Yeah.
It's really a meta-defining card. Easily the best card in the set. Yeah, I don't know, like Infinite Force, the 30 damage. Like, you don't really realize it until you actually play Gardevoir, but the 30 damage, like, adds up so quick.
Yeah.
Like, you really don't need that many energy to hit insane numbers. The ability is obviously very good. It stacks and whatnot. Even if you get, like, 2 Gardevoirs out, there's a lot of turns where you don't even use both abilities, just because you don't really need to. But just having the option to is really good.
Yep.
The GX attack is surprisingly not used very much. I think its main use is against Gardevoir, where Garbodor, where you use a bunch of items in the beginning to kind of get your setup, and then your first attack with the Gardevoir GX is just shuffle all the items back in, so kind of minimizes their damage output. But other than that, it really doesn't have a big use. Shuffling 10 cards is actually quite excessive sometimes, and can potentially actually make your deck a little clunkier than it needs to be in the late game. But 230 HP is so much HP. It's so much health to try and kill, to try and take down. Weakness to Metal. There's really not that many great Metal Pokemon in the format. Metagross is the only real Metal deck, and even that, you can kind of play things to get around it. Like, you could play a Turtonator GX in your deck, and that really puts a lot of pressure on the Metagross. There's really not many good splashable Metal Pokemon. I've tried. I've tried a bunch of cards already. I mean, your 2 options really are Sizer EX and Magearna EX. Sizer requires you to play multiple Metal Energy because it takes 2 Metal Energy. While Magearna has a really awkward amount of HP at 160, which means that, assuming the Gardevoir GX deck plays a Gallade, which almost all of the lists are, a Gallade with a Choice Band just one-shots a Magearna EX before it even has the chance to come up and kill a Gardevoir. Yep. So it really doesn't have very many hard counters that are easily put into any other existing decks. So it's going to be, so it's a very strong card. It doesn't have that many splashable counters, therefore it's a force to be reckoned with. That's all I can say. The really interesting thing though is kind of figuring out what the optimal list is, because there's a lot of different ways you could play it. You could play it with Octillery, you could not play with Octillery, you could play with Diancie, you don't have to play Diancie, you could play Sylveon GX, you don't have to play Sylveon GX. So, I don't know, there's just a lot of experimenting to do to get to the optimal list, but almost certainly this will be the deck at Worlds.
Absolutely, yeah. I expect to play multiple copies of these day one. Like, I think this will be like not only the most popular new deck, but just like the most popular deck probably day one of Worlds.
Yeah.
So
It's like it's just by far the best deck. Like
and
there's
I
not.
think
Yeah.
I think almost like more than likely we will see a Worlds deck printed of this card, and it wasn't even like a defined, like it hasn't been a card this whole year, but it'll be a Worlds deck most likely. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really that good.
Sure. So we've raved about this card enough. We'll continue on to one of the support cards that it gets from the set, Diancie, with 90 HP basic Pokemon, Sparkling Wish, Fairy Energy. Search your deck for a card that evolves from one of your Pokemon and put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it. Then shuffle your deck. And then Diamond Storm, 30 damage, heal 30 damage from each of your Fairy Pokemon. You will probably rarely, if ever, use Diamond Storm, but Sparkling Wish is, this was a card that in that Japanese list that I talked about earlier, this was one that the winner used in his deck, so I think that a lot of people have started their testing with this card. What are your opinions here on Diancie?
I think it's okay. I don't think... My list currently does not play any Diancie. I don't. Yeah, I don't think it's that great because it really requires you to play multiple Floatstone in your deck in order to get it out in the first turn, which is kind of awkward. So I actually kind of think Alolan Vulpix is just better because of that.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page there with you. I feel like just Vulpix, like even though like your opponent can end them out of your hands, like you get 2 Pokemon, it's a free attack, it's very easy to do turn 1. As opposed to this, it's very difficult to pull it off. And like my list right now is not running Floatstone, but I feel like if I had to play this card, I would be playing Floatstone, which is just not something I want to commit to. Yeah,
exactly. Like the deck is already pretty tight as it is because it's a stage 2, so you got to run rare candies, you got to run all that stuff. So having to play Floatstone or even Fairy Garden, I guess you could play too. But like if you play Fairy Garden, then like you have to attach the energy to your active Pokemon in order to get the free retreat. So that's awkward too.
And then you don't get to attach to Diancie to use the attack.
Yeah, right. So my list right now actually runs Sylveon instead of both of them. Sylveon's pretty. I don't know. It's kind of an interesting card, right? Because it lets you set up while also acting as a secondary attacker. I don't know if Sylveon's best, but I definitely am pretty confident that Diancie will not make its way back into my list. It'll either be Vulpix or Sylveon.
Yeah, I do like the Sylveon idea. That's something I had considered as well. I haven't tested it yet, but it just seems weird because, like, if you start with an Eevee and just get that turn 1 Magical Ribbon search for 3 cards to set up your Gardevoirs, like, that's just so good, but it's like, it's sort of the same difficulty with Diancie, right? Because you don't want to commit too much space to, like, a thick Sylveon line necessarily, so like if you want to play 1-1 or 2-1 or something like that, you're gonna have to play Floatstones or attach to retreat something, and if you go first, that's not an issue since you have a turn to do that.
Right.
But if you're going second, you want to get off that turn 1 Magical Ribbon if you can, and it just makes it kind of hard.
Yep, I agree.
But yeah, like we said, Gardevoir just in general is going to be good. No matter, I think any iteration of the deck just has potential to be really strong, just because of how good of an attack Infinite Force is.
Yeah. The only other thing about Diancie is that, like, going forward, if we see more good Fairy Pokemon, then Diancie really could get better and better. It has a potential to get better. But currently, right now, Gardevoir is really the only viable Fairy evolution.
Yep, for sure. Okay, we've got a Cutiefly and a Ribombee here, with the nothing to really talk about with a Cutiefly, but Ribombee, Honey Gather is the ability. Once during your turn before you attack, you can search your deck for 2 basic energy and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck, and then Pollen Shot for a colorless does 20. Now, when I first saw this card, I was like, oh yeah, this seems like it could be good with the Gardevoir, just having the good synergy, getting out energies, and then attaching them with the Secret Spring. But after like thinking about it a little more, maybe testing some games, I was just like, you don't like need to just continually stream energies. Like, you're going to draw the energies you need, and you don't even, like you said earlier, need to use Secret Spring every single turn necessarily.
Right.
But I do think that Ribombee is an interesting card that could be good in like some other decks. Like, it could be good in like some sort of Volcanion deck to get fire energies out, but I feel like Starmie's probably better for now, just getting them back from the discard pile. But just having the continual stream of searching energies out definitely seems like it could be pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. pretty good ability and one that could find a niche use. Isn't there another Robombi in the last set that like heals from your
Yes,
guys?
it
Or
heals
something like
20 from. It's either 20 from everything or 20 from the active. I can't remember.
Okay.
But yeah.
So I mean, both of those effects are separate. Like they're not really super special, but being able to play both of them from the same basic is actually pretty good. So could be a good support Pokemon. And the Cutiefly having free retreat is also really good as well.
Definitely should have mentioned that, but
Yeah.
okay, we'll keep going here to Morlul and Shiinotic. We've got the basic has attack that does 10 damage, 1 retreat, and then Shiinotic has Sap Strength 30 damage heal from this Pokemon, 30 damage times the amount of energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. And then Sleep Pulse 60 damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. This card seems pretty bad to me, to be honest.
Yeah, it's interesting. The strength sap, we haven't really seen quite an effect like that. But you know, if Shiinotic had 200 HP, it might be interesting.
Right.
But at 100 HP, not really that good.
It's not going to be that useful for sure. So yeah, maybe if we saw strength sap printed on some sort of GX or something like that, maybe something there. But we've got Noivern GX moving on to the Dragon types. No Noibat yet, since unfortunately Noibat is a colorless type, which does kind of make a difference. We'll talk about that in a second. But Noivern GX, Dragon type, 200 HP stage 1, with Distort, 50 damage. During your opponent's next turn, your opponent can't play any item cards from their hand. And then Psychic, Dark, Colorless, Sonic Volume, 120 damage. During your opponent's next turn, your opponent can't play any special energy cards from their hand. And then Boom Burst GX. This attack does 50 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon. Don't apply weakness and resistance for bench Pokemon. Weakness to Fairy and a 0 retreat cost. I think Noivern... I think like when the card first got announced, people were kind of freaking out about the card, right? Because item lock, like everyone... I think everyone still has the bad taste in their mouth from Seismitoad in the format last year. And they immediately saw like, oh man, this card is... Seismitoad and Giratina just mashed into one. Like, this card is so good. But then we saw Gardevoir GX, and it's a Fairy type, and this is weak to Fairy. And I think that is honestly the main thing that's going to hold this card back, is its weakness to Fairy. And also just want to mention real quick, like I said earlier, the Noibat is colorless, and this obviously is a card that's going to really need Double Dragon Energy in order to do much. And you can't attach Double Dragon Energy to a colorless Pokemon. You can only attach it to a dragon. So unless you play like, if you get like a turn 1, if you go second and get a turn 1 Wally into Noivern, you're not going to get that turn 1 Quaking Punch necessarily, or turn 1 Distort. But yeah, I'll let you talk about Noivern here for a second.
Yeah, this is a card I really like in theory, and have like 5 different lists that I want to try for right now. Like one of them's with Golbat, one of them's with Decidueye, one of them's with Salazzle, one of them's with Garbodor, one of them's just straight with Disruption. But yeah, kind of like the 2 inherent weakness things, and you've mentioned both of them, is the fact that Noibat is colorless makes it really awkward on the first turn, because like you usually want a Sycamore or something, and you don't want to Sycamore away DDE, so that's pretty awkward. And then yeah, the weakness to Fairy. So, and like I've tried, like you could, and we talked about it when we were talking about Guardy, like you can play things like Magearna or Sizer, but those are both very imperfect solutions, and you have to end up devoting like 5, 6, 7, 8 slots just to countering Guardy with a Noivern deck. So even if like Noivern is really good against everything else, if you're having to devote almost a sixth of your deck to countering one deck, maybe you should reconsider the deck that you're playing.
For sure.
I do think it's a very strong card objectively, but in when you view it in the case of the metagame, it's probably not going to be that great.
I mean, we saw that last season with Mega Mewtwo that came out last season. It was like, oh, this card seems so good, but it was in a Night March format, so it was never able to be played because it's weak to Psychic, and Pumpkaboo is obviously a Psychic type. Then Night March rotates, Mewtwo becomes like one of the best decks in the format easily, and it's played through most of the year. And then we see Garbodor come out, which is also a non-GX, non-EX Psychic type Pokemon that just absolutely destroys the deck. And I would bet that there was probably like less than 10 Mewtwo's in the room at the NAIC, and there was 1,300 people there, So,
right, exactly.
It's like, it's sort of that situation in my mind. Like, this card seems so good, like you said, but just the format will not allow for this card to succeed, I don't think.
Yep, agreed.
All right, continuing on, we've got Zygarde. Only 2 Dragon types in the set. Zygarde here, 150 HP, basic Pokemon, Land, Crush, 80 damage for 3 colorless, and then for a Dark, a Fairy, and 2 colorless, Core Enforcer, 150 damage, discard a Dark and a Fairy energy from this Pokemon. Big thumbs down from me as well. We'll continue.
I don't know if we've ever seen a Pokemon that required Dark and Fairy in the same attack.
Yeah, that's why I was kind of. It's the first time we've seen that as well, which it doesn't even really like make sense for Zygarde's type. Like it's a Dragon ground type, right? So like, a Dark and a Fairy. What? I don't know.
Card designers were like, they were just trying to have some fun.
Well, it's the same thing too with Noivern. Noivern's a dragon flying type, but we see Dark and Psychic. Like, they just went off of the colors of the Pokemon. Like,
they're like, oh, they got double dragon. It doesn't matter what
we can print any energy requirement there. It's fine.
Yeah.
All right, Meowth and Persian. Fake out 10 damage, flip a coin of heads. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. And then Persian. Screech. During your next turn, the defending Pokemon takes 60 more damage from attacks after applying weakness and resistance. And then Slash does 40 damage. Screech seems kind of interesting, but I don't think that it's necessarily that good.
Yeah, probably not. I agree. It's quite mediocre.
So we'll just move on past it then. On to the Porygon line here. We've got Porygon, code, check, choose one of your opponent's face-down prize cards, look at it, then return it face down. Kind of an interesting attack there. And then another attack that just does 10 damage. We've got Porygon 2, calculate, look at the top 6 cards of your deck and return them to the top in any order. So could be nice to, just look at the top 6 and set up your next turn. Beam, 40 damage. And then Porygon Z, we've got 130 HP Stage 2, ability Initialize. When you play this card from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may devolve each of your opponent's evolved Pokemon and put the highest stage evolution card on it into your opponent's hand. And then Zap Cannon, 80 damage, can't use Zap Cannon during the next turn. So pretty much all the attacks on this evolution line is pretty poor, but we see Initialize is kind of an interesting ability. Reminds me of the Miraculous Shine, of course, of Espeon EX. But I think right now that is pretty much going to be your best option for devolving stuff because it's a basic. You do have to attack. Like, this is cool because it's not your attack, but it's a Stage 2 Pokemon, so you have to commit a decent amount of space to it. I don't know. Maybe if you're running, like, a Rare Candy deck already, you could throw, like, a 101 Porygon Z line in to potentially get a cool turn to devolve a bunch of Pokemon and take knockouts. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, not too much to add. I think this is probably not a good card right now, but as we go forward, I know Espeon EX is still in the format next year, but after that, this depending on what cards come out, this is definitely something that could be good. Back in the day, there was an Omastar that. Yeah, it was an Omastar that just had Espeon EX's attack. Okay. So it wasn't even an ability, but it was an attack. So that was a Stage 2. And that was played in a couple of random decks as well, like just kind of as like a 101 line.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think that this has some viability going forward.
Cool. Yeah, so I don't see it like necessarily being more than a 101 line in anything, though. Like even like 2 years in the future. Like, I mean, I guess it's hard to predict like in the 2 years in the future, but just like based on the way the game is. I just feel like 101 is the most you'd ever play this thing.
Yeah, agreed.
So we've got a Hoot Hoot and Noctowl here. Hoot Hoot, see through your opponent reveals their hand. Always good to get information on your opponent's hand. But then we've got Noctowl, Hypnoblast, 30 damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. And then Night Raid, 70 damage. Look at your opponent's hand, discard a Pokemon from it. Where you at on the thumbs up, thumbs down spectrum on this guy?
Thumbs down.
I'm with you there. I think that this basic is okay if there's a better Noctowl in the future. I feel like I've said that about a lot of Pokemon in this set, but I mean, it's always that's something like worth noting. That
yeah, absolutely.
Like in the last set, I held on to a bunch of Sligoos in case there's ever like a good Goodra, since that one has the like water duplicates-esque attack. But yeah, we'll keep it moving here. We've got Bouffalant, 120 HP, basic Pokemon, colorless, obviously, with Bouffant head. 30 damage. During your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes 30 less damage from attacks, and then knock over 80 damage. You may discard a Stadium card in play.
Yeah, nothing special about this card either.
Yeah,
pretty vanilla.
Then we've got Noibat here. Unfortunately, not a Dragon type. Colorless, 50 HP basic. Agility, 10 damage for the coin if heads. During your opponent's next turn, prevent all effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon. Is there a 60 HP Noibat in the format, or is this the best option?
I think this is the best option.
Okay, cool. Are the other ones also have 50 HP? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But agility is pretty good on a basic.
Right, exactly, yeah. That's what I was going to say. Like, and it would be kind of a tough choice, too, if you're playing a Noivern deck. Like, which is better, having the a chance to paralyze and, like, buy a turn, or having that extra HP? I don't know. So we'll keep it going. We've got a Stoofle and a Beware. They love this guy for some reason. He has been in every single one of the sets so far. We've gotten a Beware, and they've all been awful. But I don't know. I guess the one from Guardians Rising isn't the worst, but
it's so cute though.
So yeah, we've got Stoofle, Baby Doll Eyes for colorless. The defending Pokemon can't retreat during your opponent's next turn, so there's that effect that you love. And excuse me. Mix up, flip a coin if heads, discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. And Tantrum, 120 damage. This Pokemon is now confused. So having a non-GX that can discard multiple cards seems like it could be okay. It does require double colorless. And you do have to flip a coin, obviously. But we do have things like Victini that could allow you to reflip. But just, I don't know, it seems like very, very mediocre. Like on the lower end of mediocre.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually think the Stuffle Baby Doll Eyes, the fact that it's a colorless energy makes it extremely splashable. And the fact that it does 0 damage is actually probably better than it doing damage.
Yeah.
Because like the times where you might want to use this is like in a time where like your opponent's like really down on resources, maybe they don't have any switch effects left, and you can bring something out like a Hoopa EX, and you just kind of like make sure that they can't retreat for the rest of the game until they deck out. Probably not going to be played in anything, but again, kind of an interesting effect that could be good at some point.
Yeah, we saw like my friend. I know Grant Manley, when he was testing Decidueye when it first came out, like back when Sun and Moon base set first came out, he was testing some Decidueye Vileplume stuff with Trevenant EX, and he actually played a Parallel City so that he could do 0 damage with the Trevenant GX or Trevenant EX's attack to keep something locked up. So
I thought about that idea too. It was pretty funny.
So we'll keep it going here. Finally done with the Pokemon. On to the supporters. The end is in sight. But there's definitely some really, really great cards here that we're going to talk about. So starting off, first off, I think one of the better supporters in the set, Acerola. Put one of your Pokemon that has any damage counters on it and all cards attached to it into your hand. So a lot of people, when they see this card, are obviously going to think of AZ as being something similar, when it's more like a Poke-turn from the SP era. But it is a supporter, so it is your supporter for the turn. But there's a lot of cool uses with this card. In those lock decks, something like a Noivern, if you get your Noivern damaged at all, you can just pick it all up and put it all back down. And expanded with something like a Seismitoad, there's the same concept. And then also with Tapu Koko GX, I think that this card actually makes that deck viable now. Like, that's a deck that we haven't seen do anything really, but I think that this card makes that to where that deck could be really good. You know, you come in, hit for 130, and then you take a hit, bring up another Tapu Koko, Acerola the back one up, and then you're reset, ready to go for the next turn. So, I don't know. What do you think of Acerola?
Yeah. I mean, this is a fantastic card. Pretty much all my lists are starting with one of it in the deck just to kind of see how it fits in. Fun fact, in any format where AZ has been legal, I have never not played AZ in any deck. I have always played a single copy in every single one of my decks when I could, just because the effect is so powerful. You might not use it every game, but like it's going to win you games at some point. And Acerola really seems similar to me in that regard. This reminds me of a card back in the day called Mr. Briney's Compassion, which was the same thing. It was a supporter and whatnot, except it didn't have the clause that had to have damage on it.
That card seems really good.
Yeah, it was pretty insane. But so this will be really good. I think it makes Vileplume decks more viable again for a couple of reasons. You get if your Vileplume gets locked active, then you can bring it back up to your hand if it gets damaged. I think kind of what you said, the Tapu Koko deck, I think like a Tapu Koko Vileplume deck could actually be very interesting because you're locking items as well as recycling your Tapu Kokos. Yeah, I don't know. I agree. Very strong card. I don't know if it'll make the cut into every single deck, but I think most decks should start with a single copy in it just to kind of see.
Got Tapu Koko Vileplume sleeved up right here. Already something I've been testing.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like seems like a good. I know Azul won an expanded League Cup, or like maybe got top 4 in an expanded League Cup with a Tapu Koko Vileplume deck with AZs in it before this card came out, and it just seems like such a good natural inclusion. But,
yep, agreed.
Okay, so we will move on to bodybuilding dumbbells. Nowhere near as good as Acerola, but I mean, it's kind of an interesting card. Pokemon Tool card. The Stage 1 Pokemon this card is attached to gets plus 40 HP. So in a deck where your Stage 1 is your main attacker, giving yourself a little extra HP could be pretty decent. But I think most of the time you're going to want to favor something like Choice Bands to do some more damage. I don't know. What do you think of bodybuilding dumbbells?
Yeah, the only deck, competitive deck that it immediately seems good in is Noivern. Actually, giving Noivern 240 HP gives it that little. With item lock, it's quite unlikely unless you're playing against Gardevoir that you're going to get one shot, and especially with the extra 40 HP. So it might even turn like a 2-shot into a 3-shot, which is really good when you combine with Acerola, because then Noivern just kind of like cycles itself and can keep the lock up much longer. Other than that, yeah, I agree with Field Blower in the format. Choice Band is just almost always a better option.
All right, so we've got Escape Rope here as well. Obviously a reprint, 3rd generation of Pokemon. We've had this card legal. Each player switches his or her active Pokemon with one of his or her benched Pokemon. Your opponent switches first. If a player does not have a benched Pokemon, he or she doesn't switch Pokemon. So, yep, this is a card, we know what it does, it's been around, and it's been a good card. It's seen play, and, every, some iteration at some point in each format that it's been legal in, so just a good card to keep around. I don't know if we need to say much more about Escape Rope.
Yeah, Escape Rope's great.
So, we've got Guzma here, really strong supporter card from the set as well. Switch your opponent's active Pokemon with one of their benched Pokemon, then switch your active Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon, so pretty much, I feel like in most instances, this is just a strictly better Lysander. Giving you an option to switch something as well, and then you always have things like Floatstone to retreat back into something if that's something you'd rather do. But I don't know. What do you think about Guzma?
Yeah, Guzma is really great. When I first started testing, I just swapped the Lysanders out for Guzmas and everything. Though I've kind of taken a step back from that, and in a lot of things, I'm running 1/1 now. I think the biggest reason for that was my testing with Gardevoir with it. As we kind of talked about before, our Gardevoir lists don't necessarily run Floatstone or Fairy Garden or things like that, so it doesn't always, you don't really always have a great thing to go back to. So sometimes Lysander is just better if you have like your attacker active already. So depending on the deck that you're playing, if you don't have accessible free retreating, then like a good split, like a split of 1/1 is probably better. But something like Noivern has a bunch of free retreaters, so Guzma is just 99% of the time it's better than Lysander. And I'm sure there's other decks where Guzma is also just always better. Maybe something like Volcanion. You're playing Floatstones already. You want the reset effect for Volcanic Heat. So three Guzma is probably better. 2 or 3 Guzma is probably better than even including Lysander at all. But I think that's a pretty. I think even just after a couple games with your deck, you'll probably be able to tell whether you want to go all in on Guzma or do some type of split.
Sure. How do you feel about having this card, like, I mean, this sort of similar effect to Lysander being in the standard format for another year? Is that something you were, like, kind of hoping to see move out and, like, try to do stuff differently with that? Or, like, are you glad to have this effect in the format?
Yeah, sure. I haven't given it too much thought, but I think it's probably good to keep it just because we have these insanely big Pokemon in the format that without some type of Lysander catcher effect, that they could really just kind of like build up and then come active and then just bop, bop, bop. And you don't really have any way to disrupt that. I think for the most part, like Lysander and Guzma now is a pretty skill-intensive card, especially now that VS Speaker will be rotating. Because now, like, if you want to have a consistent Lysander effect, you might need to play 3 or 4 Guzma in your deck. I think I'd rather have Lysander stay around than Guzma have been a card at all. But but I do think I think in general I do like having the catcher effect in the format.
Sure. Yeah, I can agree with that. It would have been interesting. Like, I've never played in a format without Lysander, like a catcher effect, something like that. So I'm not sure, like, how those formats compare to what we have now. But I don't know. I think I agree with you that it's just like a good effect to keep around. Like, if it'd be so easy for people to just set up, multiple Metagross back on the bench and like never have threat of any of them getting knocked out and swing with something like a Necrozma, like you were talking about, like having a psychic energy build or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, right. And like, so some of the formats that I can think of right away so like back in 2006, there was the Blastoise Lugia Steelix deck, and so you just needed a Blastoise down. The Blastoise EX had the same ability as the the Boundaries Cross Blastoise, just attach water energy to your guys. So you just need to get out the one Blastoise, and then you could just kind of free reign over your energy. And they didn't have, I think Pokemon Reversal may have been in the format, but it wasn't really played at all because it was, on a flip and whatnot. So nobody really played it, and it really led to some sometimes very uninteractive games because, sometimes the Blastoise player would just go first, get a turn 2 Blastoise, and then just kind of run over all your stuff where you couldn't really disrupt them.
Back then it could have even been a turn 1 Blastoise, right? Because you could reactivate on the first turn. So.
Yeah, that's true. So I don't know. I've played a lot in both types of formats, and I think there's merit to not having the effect in the format, but I think overall it's just healthier for the game to include it.
For sure. Okay, cool. So we will continue on to another really strong supporter from the set, Kawaii. Kaiwai? I don't know. I can't really say this case.
I say Kiawe. So we got 3 different pronunciations.
I think Kiawe is actually probably correct. I remember coming back from internationals in the car. We were talking about some decks and like this new card, and Alex Wilson kept correcting me because I kept saying it incorrectly, and I still can't remember the correct way to say it. But anyway, we've search your deck for 4 fire energy and attach them to one of your Pokemon. Then shuffle your deck. Your turn ends. So really strong effect, but also a really costly effect as well. Like obviously having your turn end is going to be pretty. Pretty unfortunate in some instances, but obviously if you're going first, you don't mind that really. I think I remember you seeing something you put on Twitter where you said that you disliked this card because it makes it more luck based to like going first with Volcanion, because like going first with Volcanion and having this card exist is so good, but going second it makes it, you know, a lot weaker. So I don't know. You want to throw some thoughts out there on Kiawe?
Yeah. Just to like expand on that, going first is already strictly better than going second. So like to make a card that further punishes the player going second is really never a good thing. So like I played a bunch of the Gardevoir vs Volcanion matchup. If Gardevoir goes first, I think it's like a 80-20 matchup for Gardevoir. It's like very favored. But if Volcanion goes first, it's like 60-40 for Volcanion. Because like not only now does Gardevoir go second and can't evolve like kind of first, is that but also Volcanion gets this added tempo boost of Kiawe. Assuming that they get the Kiawe, right? But
right.
Like sometimes you don't always have a good target for it, so you don't actually go for it. But you know, most of the time it's not that hard to have one of your fire basics. Yeah, it's just I don't mind the effect at all. But if this said like you can't use it on your first turn, I think it would be fine, because sometimes it's actually good to use it in the mid game as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Like on a turn where maybe you would have just power heatered, maybe instead you Kiawe instead. So I don't know. I think it's a very strong card. Obviously, I don't really like it too much. The other thing that I'm very interested in exploring is actually Kiawe in other decks besides Volcanion. I don't know what that might look like right now, but we've
Kiawe
tossed around
with Snorlax GX, dude.
Yeah, there you go. We've tossed around the idea of Kiawe with the Huntail that does like 20 for each of your energy. So I don't know. I do feel like there's something out there besides Volcanion that Kiawe might fit in. Just not sure what it is yet.
For sure. Yeah, it definitely just is a very, very strong supporter. And obviously, like Mike just pointed out, you don't have to attach it to just a fire Pokemon. So there could be other uses for it besides just in Volcanion. So next we have Lana, another pretty decent supporter here. Heal 50 damage from each of your Pokemon that has any water energy attached to them. So bringing a little more healing to those water-based decks. We already have Rough Seas and stuff like that. I don't know. And like for things like Ninetales, it could be good as well. What do you think of Lana?
Yeah, I actually didn't know this was a card until now. One of the kids that I'm teaching or like working with how to play right now, he's been playing a Lapras deck, and he's like, how am I going to replace Rough Seas after the rotation? And now I got an answer for him.
Yeah, there you go.
Lana's pretty good. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's that good right now. I think Rough Seas is probably just better. It doesn't take the supporter. I mean, you might play one of in like a water box deck, but it's okay.
Sure. We've got Mount Lanakila here. The retreat cost of each basic Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's, is colorless more. So same effect we've seen as Team Aqua's Secret Base, but without the stipulation of Team Aqua Pokemon. So
right.
Kind of interesting. So now you can play your Team Aqua Pokemon deck and not have to worry about not having free retreat.
Yeah. Stadiums like this are always, or they're never great, but they're never bad. I think it might have a niche use somewhere down the line.
Yeah, I don't know that Team Aqua's Secret Base has ever been used in a like really deep run at a regionals or anything like that, but I've definitely seen some lists that used it in like fun rogue decks and do well at like League Cups or City Championships and things like that. So it could definitely be a card that, you know, could make its way into a fun rogue deck, and you never know, it could actually end up being something that was really good. So
yeah, for sure.
All right, next up we have Olivia here. Search your deck for 2 Pokemon GX, reveal them, and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So this seems really good if we move forward, like once we get to like the Sun and Moon on format as a search-based supporter as opposed to a draw-based supporter. But right now, you know, we just have so many great draw-based supporters that I don't think that this card is necessarily going to really be that good. Yeah,
totally agree. Like 9.5 out of 10 times you're going to want a Sycamore over this.
But yeah, this reminds me a lot of like some of the you know, older supporters that let you search your deck for evolution Pokemon. Like, you know, there's the Holland supporters. There's the yeah, what's the is it Roseanne's that lets you search for Pokemon? Yep.
Roseanne's Research, yep, and like Celio's Network. Those are all heavily played back in their day. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to move back towards that if like they don't reprint a Sycamore Juniper type effect. This could definitely see some play.
Yep. And almost certainly the 2019 season will be Sun and Moon onwards, so I feel like this is going to be a great supporter at that time. But once again, there'll be, like 5 or 6 new sets at that point, so we don't really have a way to preemptively say that necessarily. But
yeah,
we'll continue on to Pulmeria here. Discard 2 cards from your hand. If you do, discard 1 energy from one of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, I had talked with one of your teammates when I had Sam Chen on for his interview after the NAIC. He sang praises about this card. He thinks this card is really, really good. He said that it's the first card since Energy Remover from like base set that lets you pick an energy from anywhere on your opponent's field to discard it. Besides that didn't require a flip like Catcher or
Energy Removal too, or Crushing Hammer. Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you think of Pulmeria here?
Yeah, very, very strong card. Sam has yet to send me a list that includes Plumeria, but
well, I think when he talked about it like in the future is just like being a good card to have around, like a strong concept. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, an expanded card's insane with Execute. Like that's really, really good. In Standard, you have to be a little bit more careful with your resources because you're really trading 3 cards, like the Plumeria and your other 2 cards, for getting rid of 1 card on your opponent's side of the field. So it does feel it does feel relatively balanced in that sense, but it's still very strong. I think probably the decks that most effectively are going to use this are either lock decks, like a Noivern type of deck, or decks that run Starmie, actually, because Starmie lets you kind of like plus ones, right? Because you discard 1 and get 2 back, so you're like net a card, and Plumeria like minuses a couple cards. So over the course of the game with Starmie, Plumeria, you can kind of break even on your resources. So I think that's something that I've been thinking about. I don't know if any decks right now really want to play both Starmie and Plumeria, but I do think that's a combination that is potentially a little bit overlooked right now.
Sure. Okay, yeah, so we will continue on to another stadium card. We've got Po Town here. Whenever any player plays a Pokemon from their hand to evolve one of their Pokemon, put 3 damage counters on that Pokemon. So I think one of the most obvious uses for this card is going to be post-rotation. Once Team Magma's Secret Base rotates, this is a way for you to get damage on your bench so that you can boost Drampa GX's Berserk attack. But I'm not sure outside of that what other uses there could really be for this card. What do you think about Po Town?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty decent stadium in a format that evolution decks won't be running that many stadiums. So like against Gardevoir, it's actually quite good because Gardevoir decks typically don't run many stadium cards or any stadium cards. They run Field Blowers, but they only have 2 of those. So if you play 4 Po Town, eventually one of them is going to stick. And you could actually have some like interesting interactions with either the Espeon EX, where you devolve their guys, or maybe even that Porygon card, where you're forcing them to devolve and then take damage when they re-evolve. It's kind of like there was an old deck called Rocklock that's what its strategy was. But the only thing about that is, like, it's only 3 damage counters, and most of the evolutions, like the stage 1s and stage 2s that you're evolving into, are GX Pokemon, which have, upwards of 200 plus HP. So 3 counters in the grand scheme of things might not really be that impactful. I think it's an interesting card, and it may see some play, but I can't think of a deck that really wants to play it right now.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. Okay, so next we have Rotom Deck's Pokefinder mode, or Pokedex 2.0. We've got look at the top 4 cards of your deck and put them back on top of your deck in any order, then shuffle them back into your deck. So you kind of get the option of, like, if I don't like these 4 cards, I'm just going to shuffle them back in so I can have a different card on the top of my deck. But I don't know, it's sort of like a Puzzle of Time plus Pokedex hybrid, or just like a free shuffle your deck. I don't know. What do you think of this card?
It's pretty weak. These cards have always never been that great. So nothing to really talk too much about. I mean, like it's okay with artillery, I guess, but like
Sure.
you're probably just gonna like rather run a card like Mallow where you guarantee the two cards that you want.
Or even 4 puzzle at a time, like.
Yeah, yeah, right,
So,
right.
so yeah, I agree with you. This seems like a pretty. This is one that's going to get put in the bulk box for sure.
Yeah.
So we've got Sophocles here. Discard 2 cards from your hand. If you do, draw 4 cards. What do you think of Sophocles?
I think it's better than the vanilla Tierno, Sharon, Howe cards that we've gotten. Discarding cards is always a pretty good effect, ironically, and drawing 4 cards straight isn't bad. I don't think it really has a place right now in the format, but as we've talked about, as some other stronger draw cards rotate, like Professor Sycamore, this actually seems like a pretty good option.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. And Super Scoop Up here, a card that has been around the game forever. I know, like, when people saw this card was reprinted, they were, like, really upset, like, oh, I don't like this card in the format. I was like, you should have expected it. It's, like, been around.
Yeah.
It's literally been in basically every format for forever, you know?
Yeah.
But anyway, Super Scoop Up, for those who don't know, flip a coin. If heads, put one of your Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your hand. This has been a great card in those lock decks, just preventing KOs and like on things like Seismitoad, great in Noivern. I don't know. What do you think of Super Scoop Up? What are some good uses for it right now?
Yeah, super strong card. I don't really know what really wants to play it right now. The big downside of Super Scoop Up right now is that half the time it does nothing, half the time it does something great, but 100% of the time you're giving Garbodor 20 more damage.
Sure.
So there's almost like a higher risk than ever before with Super Scoop Up. So that's why I think it'll be less played than maybe it has been in a long time. But you know, in a deck like Tapu Koko or Noivern, I think it'll find some play.
For sure. And like good with those, like something like a Raichu, you know, that can let you reset that effect to paralyze continually. But yeah, continuing on, we've got Tormenting Spray. Choose a random card from your opponent's hand. Your opponent reveals that card. If it's a supporter card, discard it. So this is kind of a interesting item card. What do you think of this guy?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I didn't really notice it the first read through of the set, but I feel like, I mean, its main use is going to be in some type of crazy disruption lock deck where you try and go like red card delinquent and then hoping that they've saved their one supporter card in their hand, you Tormenting Spray and get rid of it. I think it's a lot easier to do something like that than like jam a whole Serena line in to just discard whatever the card is. But the downside is that, you know, they could be holding just a Tabulele instead. Yeah. And then your lock's just completely done.
Then you should have played Captivating Pokepuff.
Yeah. Maybe you just play both. So it seems okay in a deck like that. In any other deck, it's probably not very good. But I don't know. I am a little scared that like a crazy lock deck like that could be created with a card like this.
In Expanded, kind of just as like a for fun kind of bad deck, I've played a Love Disc Decidueye deck.
Okay.
So the idea is going first, you just go crazy turn one, red card delinquent your opponent, red card Pokepuff delinquent, and hope that you get them down to 0. Pray they don't top deck anything, and then just Love Disc, Heartwink and Feather Arrow until they lose. So this could be an inclusion in that deck, but not that deck is ever going to be something that's sees much play. So, but definitely just a fun deck to mess around with. But anyway, continuing on, we've got Weakness Policy, a reprint from Primal Clash. Pokemon Tool, attach it to one of your Pokemon that doesn't already have a Pokemon Tool attached to it. The Pokemon this card is attached to has no weakness. So yeah, I mean, it's a decent card to have in the format. It never really saw too much play. I know some Trevenant decks last season would play it and Expanded because of how popular Yveltal was. But I think a lot of Trevenant players opted to play Headringers over that and just saw it as kind of a better card against that matchup and also against like other matchups as well, where Weakness Policy would normally be useless. But yeah, what do you think of Weakness Policy? Any great uses for it right now that you can think of, or?
The only use is probably in Noivern to try and circumvent the Gardevoir weakness. It's a lot weaker of a card with Field Blower in the format because it can just get discarded. But if you're using Noivern to stop their items, then they can't Field Blower your weakness policy. So it gives you some way to potentially beat Gardevoir. The big downside, though, is that by attaching a weakness policy, you don't get the extra damage from Choice Band. So
or muscle dumbbells or whatever.
Right, exactly. So yeah, we've talked about like all these different tools that Noivern can play, but unfortunately, it can't play them all. So if you could attach two tools to Noivern, I think it would be actually quite good.
Yeah, I don't know why they got rid of the ancient traits. Like, cool those are really cool. They only kept them around for like 2 sets, pretty much.
Yeah, I know. So other than that, though, weakness policy probably pretty weak.
Sure. I see what you did there. So we've got Wiki here. Each player counts the cards in their hand, shuffle those cards back into their deck, and then draws that many cards. So, like, kind of like an interest. It's sort of like a draw supporter, but not really a draw supporter. I don't know. It's like it refreshes your hand potentially. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a card that right now is very weak, but potentially once we do a rotation, it may become a decent supporter, depending on what's in the next couple sets and how our rotation looks in a year from now.
Yeah, because if you have 6 cards in your hand and they're not doing anything for you, and you can just wiki, shuffle, draw 6 more, there's a chance that you're going to draw something nice. But
right, exactly.
If you need a draw supporter and you draw a wiki off of like an N to 2, you're going to be in a really bad spot. So,
right.
And then the last card in the set to talk about is going to be Wishful Baton here. Pokemon tool card. The Pokemon that this card is attached to, or excuse me, if the Pokemon this card is attached to is your active Pokemon and is knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, move 3 basic energy cards from that Pokemon to one of your benched Pokemon. I'll let you talk about this card if there's anything you want to throw out there about this guy.
Yeah. So, I mean, this should remind you of Experience Share. It's kind of similar, created in a similar vein. I think if this came out before Field Blower, card would have been insane.
With Darkrai being so good.
Yeah. With Field Blower in the format, though, kind of weak. But you might be able to play it in a weird deck where maybe the format goes to most decks are only playing 0-1 Field Blower, and you can get away with playing a bunch of Wishful Baton. I don't know. It's probably not that good, but I think it's a good card to have around.
Sure. All right, and that basically does it. We've got the full arts here. Don't really need to talk about those. If you guys want to see what all the full arts look like, the link is in the description. I guess one more card we can just mention real quick is Tapu Bulu is in the set as a full art and a hyper rare, since we did get it as a 10 promo. So Tapu Bulu, Nature's Judgment, really good attack, 120 damage. Discard all energy attached to this Pokemon. If you do, this attack does 60 more damage. And then Tapu Wilderness, 150, heal all of this Pokemon's HP. And then Horn Attack, first attack, 30 damage for 1 grass. We saw a couple of placements of this deck in Day 2 of the North American Internationals, a couple in top 16, I believe, as well. Yep. The deck actually performed a lot better than I expected it to at the North American Internationals. And I think a lot of the more well-known players didn't play the deck, but we saw a lot of players that haven't necessarily had the best seasons do really, really well with the deck and make it into Day 2. So I don't know. What do you think of Tapu Bulu as a card? Obviously stays in the format, I guess, a little longer with this set. What do you think of Tapu Bulu Vikavolt moving into Worlds?
I mean, going in to my testing for internationals, I dubbed Vikavolt the worst best deck.
Yeah, so I'm right there. That, I've said those words to my testing.
Yeah, yeah. It was just of the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 decks, I just thought it was by far the worst because I just felt really inconsistent to me. So I don't think much changes going into Worlds. I still don't think the deck is really that great, but it did see success. So definitely have to keep it on my radar. I won't be playing it, but I'll know how to play against it.
Yeah, it was a deck I was expecting to play 1 or 0 against at the North American Internationals. I played against 3 day 1. Wow. So that was very not something I expected, but yeah, I think that is going to do it for the set. We've got the full arts, hyper rares, like I said. You guys can take a look at those if you want. We did get a full art of the Lycanroc promo, I forgot that as well. So the one that has Crunch and the GX deck that does 200. Not a card that's ever seen too much play, but yeah, 6 full art supporters in the set as well. So collectors are going to have a hard time getting all those. We got Secret Rare Choice Band as well. And Secret Rare Multi-Switch, kind of a random card for them to have printed as a Secret Rare. And then the 3 energy types, Fire, Darkness, and Fairy. I think that leaves Water as the only one we haven't had a Secret Rare of.
So, you would know better than myself.
Yeah. So I think that's right. But anyway, there is the set. There's our Burning Shadows set review. Huge thanks to Mikey for coming on and doing this with me. I appreciate your insight and you taking some time out of your evening to sit down with me for a couple hours, a little longer than I was hoping it would go, but
it's okay. Like I said, this is I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot of new Pokemon. I know what all the cards do now. This has been informational for me as well.
All right, so I did this with Russell whenever he came on for my Guardians Rising set review. Let's do top 3 cards from the set after looking through, rank them backwards to forwards, 3 to 1. What do you think? Just best cards in the set.
Okay, give me a sec.
Yeah, I'll put you on the spot, so I'll let you think. I'll do mine real quick, if that's
sure,
okay.
Sure.
So I think number 3 for me, I'm gonna give it to Darkrai GX. Now I know, like in Standard, definitely not as great of a card, but like we talked about, it's just such a good card in Expanded. I feel like it just really deserves to be on the list for how good it is in Expanded and alone. And then I think number 2 is going to be the supporter Acerola for me. I just think that card is very, very strong. Like you said, the AZ effect was always really good, and Acerola brings that now. Like, just makes it basically strictly better. And then number 1, I think probably going to be similar to Mike's number 1, is going to be Gardevoir GX. Just the card is just too good, like we've talked about. So you want to talk about? You got a top 3 for us to share?
Yeah. So 2 out of 3 are the same. I'd probably put Acerola at number 3 for me.
Okay.
Very, very good. Number 2 is going to be Guzma. We talked about that. It's very strong. And then number 1, for the same reasons. Gardevoir is just totally meta-defining Pokemon. It's just so good. So very, good. Very like good. once you play 5 games with Gardevoir, you're like, if you don't believe it, just play 5 games with it, and then you're gonna be like, oh wow.
Like, I mean, really that good. Even going into Worlds, like, I feel like the only deck that's going to always have a favorable matchup against it is going to be something like Metagross.
Yeah.
But, like, even then, like, I feel like you can beat it potentially with, like, Secret Springs DCEs on Lele's and stuff like that. I don't know. But, like, the card is just really, really strong, like you said. Even it's, like, you're going to have to go into Worlds playing it or beating it, I feel like. And there's not really that much that I feel like beats it.
Yeah, so. I totally agree. So we'll see.
All right, so I'll give you a second here, Mikey. Thanks once again for coming on. I'll give you a second to do any sort of plugs, some shout-outs, anything you want to do, give you a chance, plug your social medias, all that stuff. The floor is yours.
Sure, thanks. So I am on Twitter. You can follow me. I am lucky to have a nice, unique last name. So my Twitter handle is just literally my name, at Mike Fouchet, MikeFouchet. That's where I talk a lot about my Pokemon stuff. You can feel free to message me on Facebook. I usually don't accept friend requests from people that I haven't met in real life, but feel free to message me. I'm down to talk about Pokemon. DM me on Twitter or whatever. I like to help. Feel free. I write for 6 prizes. I've mentioned them a couple times, but I'll definitely plug them. I've been writing for 6 prizes since they came out, and so like 6-7 years. So for a long time, really enjoy writing for them. I have another article coming out in a couple weeks. And then I guess just shout out to my team X-Files. It's a lot of good players. We have, I think, 6 members in Worlds this year, so hopefully, hopefully can take it down. And yeah, that's about it.
Sweet. So thanks again for coming on, Mike. Really enjoyed having you. Hope to have you on in the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And definitely looking forward to this set. I think it's really good, and looking forward to Worlds as well, seeing what kind of cool decks people come up with. Since this is the first tournament in this format, I think it's really going to be a testament to like who the best deck builders in the game are. So I think that's going to be pretty exciting to see.
Yeah.
So thank
Absolutely.
you guys as well for watching this video. Definitely leave a like down below if you enjoyed. You can also leave a comment. Let us know what your top 3 cards are from the Burning Shadows set. Good luck to everyone in their pre-releases this weekend. Hope you pull some fun cards and get some good stuff, all that good stuff. So you can also follow me on Twitter at TrainerChip, Facebook, Instagram, all that is the same at TrainerChip. And thank you guys for watching. I'm going to get out of here. Make sure you subscribe to all that good stuff. I'll leave links to all Mikey's stuff in the description. And that's going to do it for us. Until next time, guys, take care.